Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Endeavour News. I am your host, Hector, and I'm here with my co host, Gilbert.
Hey everybody, how's it all going?
And we're also here with special guest, Tim Starr.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on. I'll leave it to Gilbert, and he'll further introduce our guest.
Awesome, excellent. This is great. Yeah. So today, we're thrilled to welcome on Tim Starr to the show, known for his deep insights across a range of geopolitical issues. He's a dedicated advocate and commentator, spans multiple areas, but is particularly focused on Ukraine, through his involvement with Conservatives for Ukraine. He's been a strong voice supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and freedom, emphasizing why their struggle matters globally. Tim also his expertise allows him to connect the dots between Ukraine and other key issues on the world stage, providing a comprehensive view of why this conflict resonates so widely. We're really looking forward to exploring his thoughts on the U.S. election this show, the upcoming Trump administration, Ukraine, and beyond, diving into the dynamics that make this moment so critical. So, Tim, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm certainly very happy about the election. Uh, haven't been able to stop chuckling to myself about it ever since. I will confess I was a bit nervous that they'd try to pull some fraud out of the bag at the last minute, but I'm happy to see that there haven't been any real signs of that yet.
Yeah, I think we all were. Yeah, but it was such a relief to see nothing. Well, hold on, we did actually see some funny stuff, didn't we, Hector? Because we did a huge live stream, but we did see.
Yeah,
Remember, Hector? Yeah,
Yeah,
there
there
was
was
a
stuff
little
with
bit.
like bomb threats in Georgia, and there was like weird things going on with the ballots in Pennsylvania.
with the
Yeah,
trucks. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
but it seems like whatever that was relatively minor compared to what happened in like 2020, and the support for Trump was just way up and Kamala's way down naturally. So I think that's just what we
Yeah.
were able to see there. There's a little bit of funny business going on with like voting machines and trucks and bomb threats, but it was nowhere
Mhm.
near enough to turn the tide.
All the fun
Yep,
stuff, huh? Yeah.
right. Yeah, their whole theory was to try to make it too big to rig, and that seems to have worked.
Yeah, it seems that worked pretty well
Mm.
actually. I was saying that as the votes were coming in. I guess this is like an interesting time to start it. It's like, at what point did you think, yeah, Trump's got it on the bag on election day? Like, when was the point where you saw this state had flipped or this county had flipped? What was that moment we went, yeah, Trump's got this?
I guess the decisive moment for me was when he got Pennsylvania, and that
Yeah,
was, pretty far along into the process. But again, I was very scared that there'd be a repeat of 4 years ago when we'd all wake up the next morning and find out oodles of more votes had suddenly been found hiding in a back closet overnight, and it just so happened to be enough to squeak Harris over the line in some key areas, but no,
Mm.
that didn't happen at all, thank God. And the thing is, with the way the U.S. Electoral College goes, there's some states that are swing states; they could go either way. Pennsylvania is one of them, and then there's other states that are pretty much a sure thing. Uh, and Alaska's one of those. So Alaska gets 3 electoral votes. So with him coming in at 267 electoral votes and needing 270 and getting, Pennsylvania, we knew he was going to get Alaska. Alaska was a sure thing. So that basically, as soon as he hit 267 on the East Coast, that means he automatically got 270. The rest of it was gravy after that. However, I must say I was really impressed that after that, all the other swing states went for Trump. And in fact, if you look at the uh, data from within states, um, the states that went changed most in the pro-Trump direction were the deep blue states like California. So oddly
Mm.
enough, he gained more than 10 percentage points. Yeah,
Wow.
see, if you look at the
Wow.
detail there, I'm from California, born and raised there for 40 years, so I know it pretty well. I was in the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And it's kind of typical for a long time that uh, the interior of California is red and the coastline is blue. politically, but it was a lot more so this time than 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So
I mean, just look
I
at
think that,
Orange County, like huge city in California, and it's basically 50-50 Trump, 50-50 Kamala, which is, a big
yeah,
coastal
exactly.
city.
Exactly. Now, that is traditionally one of the more conservative coastal counties in California, but that hasn't been so much the case lately. It was where I believe Reagan was from. I think it's maybe Nixon was from there. I can't remember for sure. So it was a lot more conservative way back when, but not so much lately. Nevertheless, it's also where Disneyland is. Uh, but
Fair
you
enough.
know,
So
yeah.
Mickey's actually voting for Trump this time, is what you're saying.
Apparently, yes. Somebody at Disneyland is. I actually used to know a guy who worked in a marching band at Disneyland. He played the trombone, but he's retired. Anyway, yeah, the you know I saw another map of the country where it all it did was color code it according to whether or not it had gone more blue or
Yeah,
more red.
I'm trying to find that
And
one now. I think that was the New
yeah,
York Times map. Just give me a second. I'll bring that up.
right.
Yeah, but it
And
was
well,
basically just a sea of red.
exactly. That's the thing that really struck me is, if it was a repeat of 4 years ago or even 8 years ago, where California was a hell of a lot more blue, I think that there would be a lot more Democrat protest against the election outcome. But
Yeah, here we
seeing
go.
that they're losing the most, yeah, that's it. So that's to me an amazing map that almost the entire country is more red than it was last time, and hardly anything is more blue. So to me, this is the ultimate thing that's going to quiet down any protests about the election on the part of the Democrats. And ultimately, this is what I was hoping for the most, which is that they would lose so badly that hopefully they would see the error of their ways and do some real serious course correction. I haven't seen any signs of the course correction yet,
I just seen
but
blaming. I saw someone was blaming like Taylor Swift, and someone was blaming like Kamala, and someone was blaming like Joe Biden for not dropping out earlier. So there's a lot of like
yeah.
blame games going on right now.
Well, and then also they've been blaming Latinos because
Oh
it turns
yeah,
out
yeah,
Yeah, they have.
turns out,
yeah.
you know, I had a good friend who was she had a PhD in psychology, and she said, among other things, that different cultures have different things that they consider to be their highest values.
Of
And she
course.
said, in Hispanic culture, the two highest values are family and beauty.
Mm, mm,
Yeah,
mm.
and family. It's sort of been this I don't know, cliche or stereotype for conservatives that they present themselves as the party of family values. But
Mhm.
I was listening to another commentator, I think it was Victor Davis Hanson, pointing out that in Hispanic American culture today, you are not really considered to be doing your duty as a person if you're adult, single, unmarried, no children.
Oh.
And the
Mm,
thing is that if you look at the election stats breakdowns by not just gender, but also married versus unmarried, what you see is that the biggest, strongest discrepancy in voting is the unmarried women vote Democrat the most.
mm, mm,
For married women, there's hardly any gender gap, and it's a definitely there's an overall male female gap in Republican versus Democrat, but it's
Yeah,
the unmarried women that are really making the big difference there. And you know,
I
I'm
found
sure
it.
there are
Found it. There we
some.
go.
Yeah, that's it, right? So I'm sure there are some unmarried Hispanic women, but it's definitely not considered the norm or the ideal. You
mm.
don't really think of crazy old single cat ladies that are Hispanic, and it's certainly not the stereotype of the Karen who always wants to talk to the manager to complain about something. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
They seem to
Oh,
be
well.
much more family oriented on average.
The Juanitas, right? Yeah. Oh well, GG Karens. Yeah. So I mean, just looking at California in particular, I mean, wow, um, that's incredible. This, I mean, not looking at what happened there, and then, I mean, yeah, look at that, and then we saw the other
Yeah.
map Hector had. I mean,
Now, the other thing you have to bear in mind here is, I know the geography really well because I was born and raised there and, went all over the state, is that most of the population is on the coast.
Hmm.
So the
okay.
interior is much more rural. That's a lot of farmland.
Mm,
And then there's the mountains. But, the thing is, it is still part of the state. It's still a part of the culture. And, California, by the numbers is very heavily Democrat, but, um, it's certainly not uniform. And it's not all over the place.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's not a monolith. There's a lot
Yeah.
going there
I mean,
demographically,
I
for
was
sure.
joking for a while about the Democrats who were mad uh, last time Trump won about the Electoral College, saying, "Well, okay, let's have a new deal here where we break California up into the Democrat part and the Republican part, and make each of them a state."
Hmm.
And they don't want that because they know that that would be a hell of a
Yeah.
lot more additional Electoral College votes for the
Yeah.
Republicans.
It's like 19 of them from
Yeah.
memory. Yeah.
Here's the
Jeez.
results from
Yeah.
2020. So there's a change there.
Yeah. So, their strategy has been based on flooding the country with people that they think are likely to vote for them
Mm,
and packing the big cities with people they think are likely to vote for them and
mm,
basically, coddling them and letting them stay there no matter what. And then they've been, they pioneered that strategy there, then they've been applying it nationwide for the past 4 years. And
mm.
lo and behold, it turns out a hell of a lot of the legal Hispanics that are already here and been here don't like this.
Yeah, that's really funny, isn't it? That expect them to, love them and be very loyal, but it's actually very mixed, right? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
and
telling? Yeah.
yeah, and especially I think over the past 4 years, as they really scaled this up, like I would never have believed before. And I didn't used to be that much of an immigration hawk. I thought it wasn't really that big a deal. Then I started realizing they were, doing what Bertolt Brecht said when there was an uprising in East Germany in the 50s when Stalin died. That the government had clearly lost the confidence of the people, so it was time for the government to dissolve the people and elect a new one.
Hmm.
Mm,
And I think that's what the Democrats have been trying to do here.
Mm.
But I've got a friend who's a retired immigration lawyer in New York City. She's Cuban American, Hispanic, lives in a Hispanic neighborhood. She only does pro bono cases. All her clients are legal Hispanics, and she said they're all getting preyed on by all these criminals that got let into the
wow.
country,
Wow.
and every one of them that had a job that did not require that you speak English lost their job to an illegal alien because they can work
Mm,
cheaper
mm,
because they're being given free housing and they're being given these free food vouchers, which New York City actually just announced today that they're finally stopping.
mm, mm. Yeah,
People are
yeah.
saying, "Hey, look,
Yeah. I
Trump's
mean,
already succeeding in getting his policies enacted."
How is that even possible though? Because like Biden's still in office, right? So like that's interesting. That
yeah.
Well, I
Well,
think people are, seeing which way the wind is blowing and reading the
okay.
tea leaves and going, if we don't stop this now, we're gonna be on,
Yeah.
Trump's naughty list. Uh,
well, that's the thing. Republicans, even though they didn't flip New York, they actually made some pretty big gains within the state.
yep,
And
Mm,
same story. They made a lot of inroads, especially amongst the Hispanics, and they thought that they had that, constituency in the bag. And they also thought that they could somehow, make a big deal out of this comedian insulting Puerto Rico at the Madison Square Garden
I
rally.
think most people just
And
realized that's a joke and didn't really care, while all these media
precisely,
people, yeah.
the
yeah,
Mexicans probably loved it though.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the old musical number from West Side Story between the different Puerto Ricans, the boys and the girls, all singing. We like it here in America. I want to be in America. They're all arguing about whether or not it's better in America than Puerto Rico. Find me a
Mm,
Puerto Rican American who's living here in America who thinks that Puerto Rico is a better place.
right,
You
right,
know, I
right.
don't
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure they have things to be proud about and love their country for, and then good for them. I haven't been there. I'd like to go. I've been elsewhere in Latin America, but
Mm,
again, they know there's some bad things about Puerto Rico.
mm.
Hmm. What do you think about
Yeah.
Puerto
So,
Rico? Should it become independent? Should it be a state? What do you think the deal is there?
um, as far as I know, every time they've had a vote about it, a minority has at most, like I think 30% at most, has said they want it to either be independent or become a state. I think they pretty much like it the way it is. Um, one thing, there's a couple things about it. One is that the Puerto Rican government itself is very corrupt, like a
Yeah.
lot of Latin American governments. So I think they don't really trust their own politicians to do a better job if they're
Mm,
not connected to the US anymore.
mhm.
Also, they've got a special tax deal where you can actually US citizens can work there and be free of US income taxes.
Ooh,
Yes.
wow,
Yeah.
really?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
If they do join the US and become a state, they'll have to comply with all federal laws, which I think a lot of Puerto Ricans probably don't want. So,
Yeah. And it's like the only place in the world where you can be a US citizen and not pay US income taxes legally, until like 10 years after you've left the country and renounced your
Oh,
citizenship. So
wow,
they've actually had a huge influx of rich people moving to Puerto Rico for that reason.
mm,
And
nice.
that's a lot of investment that they would not be getting otherwise. And
Mm,
some people are mad about it, like, oh, how dare these rich people come in and buy up all the best houses and all that. But they're bringing investment into the country too. They have to hire people, they have to pay people, they have to to buy stuff. So they'll lose that benefit if they go independent. That's for sure.
yeah.
amazing, interesting. I just wanted to say, like, it seems like, yeah, everything we've talked about, and yeah, what we're seeing with California and New York, it's like it kind of shatters the whole thing. This is just, to me, like, California and I guess New York is just
Like
clear evidence
Virginia.
that,
Virginia was
yeah,
pretty solid blue last election. Now it's back to, I mean, heck, next election it might be a swing state if Republicans keep making inroads there.
Yeah,
yeah,
So,
exactly right. Which ties into another topic that I didn't want to talk about before we started the live stream here, but now I can, which is gerrymandering. You guys were asking
yes.
about
hmm
Congress and how come it doesn't look like we're going to win a whole lot more new congressional seats, and that's because of the way the districts are drawn. The districts are drawn mostly by the Democrats in the Democrat-controlled states. Like California, I know they redistricted the last time in the early '90s, and they basically drew the districts. Maybe they redistricted again after that. I think they did under Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger got snookered into thinking an independent commission would redistrict in a fair fashion, but it didn't. At any rate, in Virginia, I know they redistricted not too long ago, and all of a sudden, Virginia stopped being a swing state and started being a blue state. They did that, plus they also um, pardoned a few 100,000 convicted felons who basically almost all started voting Democrat. Surprise, surprise.
hmm
So again, this is the kind of thing where you do these types of social engineering to rig the system in your favor, and I'm sure Democrats are not the only ones that do it, but nevertheless, I think that's a big part of the explanation here is that these districts are written to produce certain results as much as possible.
Hmm.
but it didn't work out. Yeah, I was gonna say, I wonder what their tech is or gonna be from now on. Now that this is completely blown up in their face, like, I wonder what the future of the Democratic Party is, and how they'll have to, because they invested so much into this woke, into this, very much.
Mhm.
floating the elite, very much,
It's like
these
basically
are,
just ignoring the grievances of the average working man, like mass
that's right.
immigration, inflation, cost of living,
Yes.
and just
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
peddling,
Yeah.
feel good, social progressive, whatever the new trend
that's
is,
right.
instead of
Yes, and to that point, I saw a very good chart posted by, Premier on Twitter about, the differential in wages between people in America with and without college degrees over the past several years, and what you could see from that very clearly was that under Biden, the income of people with college degrees continued going up steadily.
mm,
And for people without college degrees, it did the exact opposite. It was going up under Trump. It stopped as soon as Biden took office, and it's been going down ever since. And so to me, that says, the Democrats basically went all in on their base being the, upper middle class and higher college educated elite and completely forgot about the working class who doesn't have a college degree. They don't care. They
Hmm.
don't give a crap. And another factoid that I uh, love to remember here and bring up is that if you look at inequality in the US at a household level, what you see is the biggest inequality is actually between households where you have two people that are married who both have college degrees and perhaps advanced degrees, like doctor, lawyer, etc., and households that are not made up of, two married people with college degrees like that.
Hmm.
So our economic and political elite today, is like a doctor and a lawyer both married to each other, or two doctors, two lawyers, whatever.
Hmm.
And one of the things that annoys the hell out of me about that is that, if they have kids, the way they make this work is by outsourcing their childbearing to a working class woman.
Mm,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah. It's
you
yeah,
know, it's
hmm.
it's really hypocritical and pathetic. And this didn't used to be the case in America because in the past it was a lot more common that um, a man would be the primary breadwinner. And I'm not saying that's the way it should be or that we need to go back to that. Just that in the past, the man's the primary breadwinner, and his wife could be working class
Mm.
or maybe even not have a job, and that would just keep people more in touch
Mm.
with that other part of
Things that
the
matter.
society. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, right.
I think it's healthier that way. It's kids really need their mom, and they really need
Yeah,
to see their dad come and go to see that work
yeah,
ethic. Yeah.
exactly, and I am, one of the last people that would ever say it was better back then in every way, because
Mm.
you know, um, my mother had to divorce my father because he was physically and verbally abusive to her
Oh.
and us.
Mm.
So, I know what it's like to have a bad father, and I'm not saying that people bad family relationships should stay together no matter what. I'm just saying
Mm.
that
Mm. Sure.
we need to recognize this pattern that if our entire ruling elite consists of people who, all have college degrees, their incomes are all doing fine under Biden, and they don't interact with anyone who's not like that. They live in this
Yeah.
bubble. Then they're going to be out of touch. They're not going to be
Yeah.
sensitive to the concerns of the other part of the country.
It's kind of funny, yeah, that you mentioned that because so often those I guess yeah, not to stereotype, but the highfalutin types that you mentioned, they kind of would be like they would say the same sort of thing. They would say like, "Oh, those working class people driving trucks or whatever, they just haven't seen the world. They haven't. They're in their own bubble, so they
Yeah,
don't know what
right.
it's
I
like.
know.
It's like the war of the bubbles or something, and but it's like no,
Yep.
really, we can see that. I mean, this time around, people can truly tell who was in the real bubble this time, and thank goodness
Exactly.
for it, because I mean, no, we don't just need I mean, it's important that we have lawyers and doctors computer
Right.
scientists and stuff, but we need we need those people doing those things as well. So that's good to see that there is a recognition of that, and yeah, because it is painful to see all those jobs being outsourced in a million different ways. That's
Yeah.
rough. And yeah,
And
it's
that's definitely something that I think is a valid concern. I was not real clear on that for a long time, but then I read a study about it that basically pointed out again, if you do a breakdown within the category of what sectors of the economy were doing well and doing badly, um, what it turned out was that traditional manufacturing type jobs were doing terribly, but high tech software engineering sort of jobs were doing so much better that in aggregate it made things look like they were fine.
mm,
And I've worked in high tech startups my whole career, more than 20 years now, so I'm part of that and I'm a beneficiary of that. But,
mm,
I also have a lot of connections to the other side of the fence here. Um,
mm.
my family were all farmers on my mother's side.
Oh, cool.
Um, my maternal grandfather did a lot of things. He was a soldier in the U.S. Army in World War II in the European theater under Patton.
Mm.
Um, yeah, he came back. He was a mechanic. He was an architect. He was a surveyor. He was a county supervisor. He and my grandmother owned a hardware store. The two of them that they ran. She ran the cash register, and he did all the deliveries and installations and repairs. Um,
Wow.
so I have a
Well,
lot of sense for that. And this was in a rural area. It was all dairy farming land in upstate New York. In fact, it's um, Elise Stefanik's district. So, if you think about Elise Stefanik, that's where my family is from, that part of the country that she represents. And,
mm,
they are very conservative there also, um, as you would expect.
mm, mm,
It's
mm.
the only county in New York. There you go, north of Syracuse, basically. Not right on Lake Ontario with Lewis County, so just to the right, go up a little bit further. That one, Lewis County.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
That's the
there you
part of the
go.
they're from. Yeah, exactly. Right.
You weren't lying about it being conservative. Here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
Nice.
definitely how it is, and it's small population. It's the only county in New York State that's got more cows than people.
Much like New Zealand, actually.
That's what I've heard. The joke I used to hear was that New Zealand is what 3 million people and 6 million sheep.
Yeah. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, pretty much. I
Yeah,
think.
so
Mm,
I
mm,
grew up going there on summer vacations every year for a month as a kid, and it's beautiful up there. I love it up there. Unfortunately, it's in New York State, so it's subject to New York State government, which is terrible.
mm,
Maybe it'll get a little better now. We'll see. But
mm,
I have a lot of sympathy for the people who are suffering through that. And it wasn't always like this. It used to be that there was a huge industrial sector in upstate and central New York. The
mhm,
Erie Canal went through there, and there were all these businesses along the Erie Canal because they could ship stuff down the canal to the Hudson River, and down the Hudson River to New York City, and then out to the rest of the world.
yeah,
So it's sort of like
that's
the Rust Belt, but not quite in the Rust Belt sort of area.
Yeah,
yeah.
right, exactly. So it's not the Appalachians. The mountain range in there is called the Adirondacks, but
Mm,
again, culturally, it has a lot of similarities.
okay.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that industrial sort of American history. It's very cool that that
Yeah,
industrial
in fact, I even read a story a while back about some of these abandoned factories up there still had functioning um, water-powered electrical generators.
Holy crap.
And you
Wow.
actually had people from India coming in and buying them up and putting them back into service as factories.
Wow.
Because yeah,
Oh, give us back our electricity generators. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
well, they've been abandoned. And my family actually owns some land on the Independence River up there,
Mm,
and there used to be a dam there that was a a hydropower dam, and my great grandfather was one of the people that operated the dam. And
Hmm.
the dam's gone, the power plant's gone. It's nothing but wilderness now. It's
Mm.
basically gone back to nature. It's beautiful, but it's not terribly economically productive.
Yeah, we have the same problem in New Zealand where a lot of the like electrical
Yeah.
generation are just being abandoned for no reason, and then we have this problem
Yeah.
where our electricity prices are so high because they don't generate enough power. It's like, well,
Yep.
Mm.
how did we let it get to that state? Then you're surprised we get to that state. It's like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and I even read an article about fracking. And if you look at uh, I don't think there's a good map of this that we can put up, but basically, fracking is not legal in New York, but it is legal in Pennsylvania.
Mm.
And so what
mm,
that means is that on the northern side of Pennsylvania, just south of the New York border, the economy's been booming where there's fracking, and then you go to the New York side, and it's terrible.
there you go. That says it all, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, it is like the lifeblood of an economy, basically. Well, like a
Yeah.
yeah, of any country really, and that's where New Zealand we've been constantly in a wrestle with these hippies, man, who just won't us let us have our oil. So kind of
Yep.
sucks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's a map. This isn't where it's legal and illegal, but this is where all the fracking wells are in the United
Right.
States.
Yeah, so you can see there's a bunch there in northern Pennsylvania, and there's hardly anything in New York.
Mm.
Mm, yeah. There you go. Wow.
And
Jeez.
I was in Colorado before for 7 years before I moved here to Texas in 2019. So you can see in Colorado in the northeastern part, there's a big red swatch there, right there.
Mm,
That's Weld County, Colorado, which is sort of like Texas North. There's
yeah.
a huge amount of fracking there, and there's a huge amount of you know um, Texans up there working in the oil fields because
Oh,
they're the ones that know how to do it.
wow. No way.
Yeah.
So they actually traveled there to work. That's interesting. Huh.
Well, yeah. Well, the other thing is, if you look at the history of Texas, that actually used to be Texas. It used to
Mm,
go that
Mm.
far north.
yeah.
The cattle drives were driving cattle up north to hook up with the railroads, so they could load all the cattle on the railroad that went through Wyoming, which is just north of Colorado there. And then once they got on the railroads, then they could take them to Chicago to the stockyards for processing. So that was all Texas at one point, and then you know parts of Texas gradually got taken away as part of the process of Texas joining the Union and these other territories also becoming states. A
Wow.
similar thing happened to Utah. Utah was originally a lot bigger, and then Utah kept refusing to join the Union because they didn't want to give up polygamy. So they kept losing territory to other states around them that formed and said, hey, we'll be a territory and we don't care about polygamy. So yeah, that was basically part of the deal is that the Mormons had to give up polygamy in order to let Utah become a state.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
Amazing. Sorry, I had to just jump out for a sec. Um,
That's no
yeah.
problem.
Sorry about that. Yeah. People on their
yeah.
phones. Jeez.
Um, I just wanted
So
to talk about because we didn't really get time to cover a lot of these some of the later states that have only been called, literally hours
Yeah,
ago because of how long
right.
it took to count. So we've basically got the
Yep.
final results now in Nevada, and it seems like Nevada has had a pretty big swing to Republican Trump as well. Last time
Mhm.
it voted for Biden, and the time before that it voted for Hillary. So this is the only state
Right.
that has flipped that has never voted Trump before. So, like, what do you think caused that? Is again just the Dems being out of touch with the working class? I assume a lot of Nevadans are probably into like the gambling economy. I don't know what the Dems policies
Well,
were
that's
there.
true. Yeah, so, I mean, Nevada's a weird case in a lot of ways. Economically, it's basically an extension of the California economy.
Mm,
They get their gas from the same refineries as California, so it's the same prices as California. A lot of the business comes from tourism that is either from California or, comes in by way of California. Even though they do have their own international airport, so a lot comes in there too. But um, I think the two other big factors driving things in Nevada. One is the unions. So it's a union state. It's not a right to work state. And the unions basically control all the labor that works in the hospitality industry. So all the
Yeah.
hotels, all
Okay.
the casinos. Um, and they, of course, also went in big on, uh, you know, having illegal immigration come into the state to keep labor costs down because illegals work cheap.
Well, you'd think the
Um,
unions would be against that, right? Like you'd think they'd want.
they used to be way back when. In fact, it's kind of odd that they made this big leftist hero out of Cesar Chavez way back in the farm workers strike, but he was dead set against illegal immigration because he knew it cut into the wages of domestic American workers. They've basically whitewashed that part of his outlook from their official records or commemorations of him. And they made a big deal. They had a big push about trying to get the unions to turn around on this. And I think what did it finally really was that the labor unions were suffering so badly in the economy as a whole because the industries they were based on were going away, that they basically made the pitch to them, hey, if you don't let illegal aliens come in and join your unions, then you're not going to have unions anymore.
That's
you
insane.
know
You'd think like a union would be there to protect their, members, citizens of the country, workers, but seems like they just sold out
um,
like a lot of industries have as well.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, they do some good things. There's some bizarre situations. My mother was a uh, union member in the medical industry for most of her career, and they actually did some good work there. There was this situation where she worked for UCSF, University of California at San Francisco. And they tried to merge with Stanford Hospital.
Yeah.
Stanford was private, UCSF was public. But it basically was Stanford Hospital's attempt to get all the tax revenue from UCSF for itself. So it's sort of a textbook example of how not to privatize things. Uh, and the unions were the only ones speaking out against this at the time. So it is important to have people who are looking out for the interests of their workers like that. Just that's really not a lot of what they do these days. A lot of what they do is um, you know
Well, it's just been subverted like a lot of institutions within the country, right?
yeah,
It's like you'd expect, yeah,
precisely.
unions, it sounds good. Workers banding together to, try to negotiate collectively for better working conditions and whatnot. But like everything else in the States, they just get subverted. So,
Yeah, and I remember, in California, they're probably an extreme example that I can talk about both because I know about it and they're probably further along than the rest of the country or a lot of the country. Basically, the way I put it these days is California is run by the government employee unions, of the government employee unions, and for the government employee unions. I remember when the left right split within California used to be between the like the teachers unions and the medical unions on the left and the law enforcement and correctional officers unions on the right.
right.
And basically what happened there is that some conservative politicians who actually told the police unions and the prison guard unions that no, they couldn't give them more money, um, got dumped by the police and the prison guards, and the Democrats said, "Oh yes, we can totally give you more money." And so yeah, they sold out. They bought them out. Um, and where I live now here in Texas, we get a lot of people who are retiring from California on government union employee pensions, which are very good. They get a fixed percentage of their last year's total salary for life, and
Hmm.
it's a big percentage. I forget exactly how much it is, and it may vary, but it's something like 50% for life,
That's really,
and
that
that's
seems really good. How many
and
years do you have to work there to get that?
20.
Oh, okay, so that's quite a while.
Yeah, but also it's not an average of the salary you made for that whole
Yeah.
20 years. It's the last year, including all overtime and disability. So you get a lot of people who are maxing out their overtime in
Yeah,
their
just
last
working.
year and filing for disability in their last year, and then they retire. And some of them even will then, after they've retired, they'll go and get another government job.
Got
But a
another
lot,
government job in another state or something.
even in California, there's no law
Oh,
against
there's
them
okay.
getting another California government job.
Hmm.
It's bizarre. And then, but then number of them are retiring and moving to places where it's cheaper to live, like here in Texas.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, that's the California model, and that's what they were trying to apply nationwide. And again, I think as soon as they realized that Biden was no longer competent to run, they had Harris take over. She had to try and run away from all of her past positions as much as she possibly could, and basically
Yeah.
no one bought
Yeah. Well, that's the
Hmm.
thing. Like, I mean, people didn't forget that Kamala was like shilling for, BLM and rioters to be released from prison and, taking away,
Columbus.
yeah,
Remember
like
Columbus? What she said? Yeah.
against Columbus and against all these American heroes,
it. Oh yeah,
against gun rights, that sort of thing. And then then the Democrats had this weird like they tried to push a lot of these things towards the center on like gun control and the border without really
yeah,
actually having to implement it, and then at the same time just staying extremely left with like gay issues and other sort of stuff like that, which people are transgenderism, which isn't popular with the average person, so people just didn't buy it.
yeah. Correct. Right. They got at best way out in front of the popular consensus about things.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that there's ever going to be a popular consensus about, for instance, how should we really handle transgender people, where we fully respect their rights, but we don't screw up the rest of our whole society in the process. um, I don't have a firm opinion about that, and I think a lot of people don't, but a lot of what we've seen we don't like. um, it's kind of funny. One of the topics I know we were going to get to is, uh, I have a few connections to New Zealand. One of them is I actually had a friend who moved down there from America who's a transgender prostitute.
Oh,
So
jeez. Oh no, that's terrible. That's okay.
yeah,
So where are you going with this? What's
I'm just saying. Last I heard, she's happily married down there and likes it. So good for you guys.
I don't know what to say, but that's okay. Interesting. Oh well, it's I guess New Zealand isn't so small then. It really is a big
Yep,
world out there,
yep,
or
yep,
it's
yep.
a small world. I'm
Yeah,
mixing. Yeah.
definitely a small world. But yeah,
Mm,
I've got friends. I lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had lots of gay friends, etc. And I got nothing against them as
mm,
people. I just think that a lot of the lefties went way too extreme with their agenda and
mm,
alienated a hell of a lot of people over it.
mm,
Another thing just about Kamala Harris that really bugged the hell out of me is the way she would lie about her upbringing, right?
mm, mm,
So, for instance, in her debate in 2020, when she was one debate where she showed up thinking she might actually get a primary vote, and she was telling Biden, "Oh, I was a little girl who grew up being bused to school in elementary school. She grew up in Berkeley. I was born and raised in Berkeley. Okay,
Yeah.
Berkeley has never had segregated schools.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah,
It's all so common with the liberal. They make themselves out to be like these victims who have endured such
yeah,
hardship against the
exactly,
racists or something.
exactly. And then she tried to claim that she grew up in Oakland. She didn't grow up in Oakland. She only lived in Oakland as an adult in the '90s, and she
Mm.
lived in an apartment or a condo, I forget which, on Lake Merritt, which is one of the nicest parts of Oakland, right near downtown.
So
Yeah.
oppressed.
What's up with that? Like Waltz also just lied about random things that he like didn't really need to lie about, like being a head coach and stuff like that. People just saw that, they're
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what is wrong with these people? Just lying for no reason.
Yeah, Clinton
Yeah.
saying we're under sniper fire when we landed in forget
Yeah,
where.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that stuff as well. It's like, why even
Yeah,
just lie about that?
I think it was in what, Yugoslavia or something too.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
Oh yeah.
I think these people, they get used to lying to everybody about, everything they can get away with, and they can get away with it for a long time because no one's really paying attention and no one's, subjecting them to any real scrutiny. And again, this is one of the reasons I was on record with my in-laws, my wife's uh, sister and brother-in-law in 2016, saying I thought Harris was the worst of the Democrat candidates in the primaries back then. And I think it's precisely because California is effectively a one-party state.
Hmm.
You can get elected in California and hold office in California without ever being subject to any real political competition. And that was clearly obvious from the way she ran her campaign. She just had no concept of dealing with hostile questioning. She
Mm,
got mad
yeah.
whenever anyone asked her a difficult question,
Mm.
and
Like on
even
the
questions
CNN
that
interview, which was like not even like that
uh-huh,
hostile. Like people just
yeah,
questioning some stuff, and she just
right,
like broke her
exactly,
mind.
Yeah,
exactly,
reminds me
exactly,
of that the
exactly.
queen from Alice in Wonderland with the big head. Like
Uh-huh,
how could you say that? Yeah, yeah, we know
yes.
this too.
Oh, yeah, this is what these people are like. She's basically, she was a political appointee
Mm.
by Willie Brown because she was sleeping with Willie Brown while he was uh, still married but separated.
Oh no.
And Willie Brown was the power broker. He had been the Speaker of the State Assembly, and then he was mayor of San Francisco by that time. But even then, Brown was not a fan of Kamala being picked for vice president or president, and he would know.
That's terrible. She,
Yeah,
she, yeah, to go that low to try to get so
yeah,
high up the ranks.
yeah. She
Well,
basically, she didn't get a single primary vote. I don't remember whether or not she even had any primary challenges when she ran for office in California. But the other thing that amazed me, I was reading about her, is that she kept bragging about being a prosecutor, but then somebody tried to look into her prosecutorial record. That okay, what cases did she prosecute where she was the lead prosecutor? The first chair. He couldn't find any. As far
hmm,
as we know, there aren't any. She never was the lead prosecutor on any case.
that's so weird. That's
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so it's sort of weird. Like Kamala getting into this position where she's the presidential nominee would be sort of like if what's her name with Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky was somehow the the
Yeah.
Yeah.
presidential appointee or
Right.
something. Like it's just
Yeah,
bizarre.
exactly. Exactly. If Lewinsky had been appointed to, head a bunch of federal commissions and then leapfrogged into
Yeah, vice presidency,
a
and then yeah,
Senate seat and the vice presidency, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean,
very odd.
Yeah.
I don't know her, and I don't have anything against her either way, except I think she was a Harris supporter. But
Yeah, she was. I think she actually came out and support Harris a couple of days. Like
yeah,
these, I actually,
like
we should probably talk about these endorsements because they got all these celebrities endorsements, and this just sort of like proves how out of touch they are. Because the average working person does not care about celebrities, so they don't care that
Mm,
like
yeah.
Taylor Swift and
not only that, but
Beyonce.
also I was just reading today that apparently they had to pay a bunch of them to make appearances in her support. Apparently she paid apparently she paid Oprah $1 million as if Oprah needed the
Oh,
money.
What the hell?
Yeah,
Okay, that's
I was
crazy,
just
man.
reading this. I mean, what the hell, people? You know,
yeah.
I
I mean, and
guarantee
yeah, it's
I guarantee
crazy.
Trump didn't have to pay anyone to show up to endorse him. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's right. He actually cut into his funds to actually finance everything, and I mean, he did, try to get donors and
Yeah,
stuff, but you kind of to run a campaign, you sort of do need you
yeah.
gotta get, but that was because he was trying to,
Right,
do his
exactly.
thing, right?
Yeah, it was
Right.
important to him. But the other thing, so there was some podcast she appeared on. What is it called? Who's Your Daddy? There's apparently a podcast called Who's Your Daddy.
Oh,
So
okay.
she did an episode of this. Is like the only, I don't know, one of the only podcasts she did that I heard about. I didn't follow her campaign that closely, so I can't say if it's the only one. But apparently, she didn't want to go to the studio where the podcast is normally filmed. They had to come to her. And in order to come to her, she had to pay to have a special studio built for this podcast to be done in, and apparently it cost her campaign $100,000.
What the hell?
I know.
That's
I
insane.
again, maybe this story will turn out to be bunk. I don't know, but I just read this today, and I'm like, she's paying. She wouldn't even go on Joe Rogan's podcast. Okay, and Joe Rogan is
Massive mistake,
historically
eh? Like, what was she
Yeah,
thinking?
yeah.
he's historically a leftist. He was a Bernie Sanders supporter. He's fairly counterculture. He was a professional comedian.
Mm,
He's a pot advocate. They're not known for being all that terribly socially conservative. Okay.
mm,
He's never endorsed candidates before this election. And they basically said, no, we won't come to you. You have to come to us. Whereas Trump went there, not Harris, Vance went there, and Elon Musk went there.
mm,
All
mm,
three of them at the
mm.
height of campaign season to appear on the most popular podcast in the world. I watched think I watched all three of those with my wife, and they were good.
Mm, mm.
And clearly she was scared that she had to talk to somebody in person for hours at a time, unscripted, who wasn't necessarily gonna be giving her nothing but softballs
Yeah.
that
Mm.
you couldn't hack it. I mean, even when she was on The View and they asked her, fairly obvious softball questions, she couldn't answer them.
Well, I
They
mean,
asked her,
Joe
is
Rogan
there
doesn't
any,
really
is there
break
anything
people's
you would
balls when they
have,
interview people anyway, so it wouldn't have been like that hostile of an interview. It just have been like a normal conversation. That's like what Joe Rogan
yeah,
does.
right. Exactly. That's what he tries to do. And he does a good job of it. I'm not a regular listener, but
Mm.
from everything I've seen, he basically tries to, have an in-depth conversation, which is great.
Mm.
Yeah, something Kamala actually sort of needed because her image was just like weird. I guess calling herself like a brat probably wasn't like the best idea. Like looking back on it, like all
Yeah,
these bizarre choices made by Kamala's campaign that
I
just made her
know.
look
I know.
unlikable.
No. Yeah, exactly. So, I'm on record. I thought she was a horrible candidate. This is what you get when you come up in politics in a one-party state where you never have any serious competition, serious challenges. And this is one of the worst things about having a one-party state. You get incompetence rising to the top.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Hector, do you want to continue along this line of endorsements, or can I ask the next question?
Oh no, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, that's yeah, it's no, not a very wise idea to sort of enjoy yourself to the annoying little teenage girls in America that everybody's fed up with. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I've started calling them. Do you remember the old TV show Cheers with
Yeah.
in Boston, Diane and Sam? I've started calling them Diane Chambers Democrats.
oh, okay, that's good. That's good. I like that. Um, so yeah, Trump has won this major victory, along with big wins in the House and the Senate. Um, I want to get, now that we've kind of got into nitty gritty, I want to zoom out a little bit, and I want to get your thoughts on going forward with the Trump administration. What do you think we can perhaps confidently expect from this administration? Will it be truly MAGA and America first, or will it be kind of more like 2016, where it was Trump being constantly harassed, harangued, and pressured by foreign interest groups, self-interested career politicians, and saboteurs, and all these kinds of people? What's your kind of, I guess, like initial analysis for America right now going forward? And
Right.
then we can sort of maybe expand a bit beyond that. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think there's two aspects of that I can address off the top of my head. One is the political situation for Trump. I think he's got the Republican Party a hell of a lot more unified behind him now than he did last time.
Mm,
Last time he was still a total outsider. He'd come in and upset every other, establishment Republican Party politician who had been around for a long time, and they had risen to the top, and they thought basically it was their party. The entire editorial board of National Review had said no to Trump.
mm,
Okay,
mm,
this is like the flagship conservative political opinion magazine of the movement. They were all anti-Trump. Some of them still are, um, but he's done a lot better job, I think, of figuring out, who is really on his side and who's going to be on his side. You know, getting rid of Liz Cheney is a good example of this, right? She was supposedly representing the state of Wyoming, uh, and was very anti-Trump. But basically, the Wyoming Republican Party said, hell no, we're getting rid of you. She's gone. She doesn't have an elected position anymore. And somehow, supposedly, Harris thought that having Cheney endorse her would do her some good, but obviously it
Again,
didn't.
what were they thinking with these endorsements? It's insane.
I know, I
And they were
know,
saying
I
they wanted
know.
like George Bush to endorse Kamala. It's like, why? I even said this before the election happened. It's like, why would you want that?
Yeah, yeah, he's certainly nowhere near popular enough amongst the Republican Party. I think Bush, George W. Bush gets a bit of a bad rap on foreign policy, even though I have my own criticisms of him there. But there's no way he was going to do Harris any good politically. That was just
That would have just
not
pissed
going to.
off more Democrats, wouldn't it? If you got the if
Yeah,
if
Yeah,
George
it's,
Bush
yeah,
it's
endorsed
true.
Kamala.
yeah. So Trump, I think, he's got a lot more of a unified team this time around. I was skeptical of JD Vance as a VP pick at first, but I've warmed up to him, mostly because I don't think he'll be as bad on foreign policy as I was afraid of, which we can get to. But
Okay.
the other thing is that uh, on economic policy, uh, I'm pretty confident that Trump is going to return to a stronger version of what he was doing before. I read a good article years ago about Trump's economic strategy, which is that it was basically the first time any US president had ever combined all three elements of tax cuts, deregulation, and low interest rates all at once. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
it made a big improvement. I think he's going to try and basically do that again, only more so.
Yeah,
Uh,
and also I think an important one is he's talking about reversing the open border policies of Joe Biden and Kamala. So
yes,
that's also
Hmm.
extremely popular with the average working man because they don't want to see their
yes,
their labor being undercut. And if he does go through, it seems like him and Vance. There's been recent interviews where they're talking about like, yeah, we have to do these deportations, we have to get
yeah,
these
oh yeah,
illegal workers out of our country, and that's fair
yeah,
enough. So it's like they came here illegally; they're not welcome to stay. So if
yeah.
you
And the
combine
other
all
thing I
that,
like,
oh, sorry, you go.
yeah, and the other thing I like about that is they're saying they want to prioritize the violent criminals first,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that makes a ton of sense to me for all kinds of reasons. And this I think also ties in a bit to the the geopolitical situation, which is that you know with this flood of you know violent criminals entering the country and staying here illegally. This wasn't just people spontaneously deciding, hey, life sucks here. I'm going to move to America and see if I can do better. It was countries like Venezuela saying, let's open up our prisons and get rid of all our violent criminals and send
Yeah.
them north. It was Russia beefing up its staff at its embassies in Mexico to provide assistance for this. It was the Biden administration using FEMA money to fly them into the country.
Nuts. Yeah, absolutely insane.
They
Yeah.
had you could download a phone app apparently if you were one of these aspiring illegal migrants, and you could basically book a flight and get a free flight here to some country in some swing state like Springfield, Ohio, where they had a flood of thousands of illegal migrants, in a very short time frame.
Hmm.
Um, and they were doing this all over the country. I had a friend in Texas years ago told me that they had a flood of Hispanic illegal migrants coming into his school district, his kid's school district outside of Dallas. And he said it basically wrecked the school year for his kids because the teachers couldn't handle the influx. They couldn't teach anything. They're spending all their time to simply trying to,
Hmm.
you know, uh, assimilate all of these brand new students who couldn't read or write, certainly not in English, and maybe not even in their own language.
Mm. Yeah,
You know,
yeah. No, that's tricky. It's not easy to, especially if there's tons of them. How are you gonna manage the kids who like speak broken English and I imagine and can't even don't even know how to operate in a completely foreign country
yeah,
that they're used to.
exactly,
So
exactly.
yeah.
And again, going back to the California model on this, so California, it has one of the highest poverty rates in the country
Wow.
of any state, and it has one of the highest numbers of welfare cases of any state. I can't remember the exact statistic, but the California has more welfare cases than a large number of other states combined.
Wow.
As I
Wow.
recall, the statistic is something like 33% of all the welfare cases in the United States are from California.
Oh my God.
Wow, and it's only like what? 12%
It's
of the
not 30.
population or something? Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's not 33% of the population, I guarantee you that. Yeah. So
Oh my,
this is what they've been doing. They've been letting people come into the country illegally. Um, they go on welfare. They either work under the table or they get them government jobs. And you know,
Well, like in
it's
New
really
York, they just give them
frustrating.
money. Just give them, $500 a
Yep.
week.
Give them money, put them up in a hotel so that they have their housing paid for, they have their food paid for, and then they go to work as a delivery driver because you don't need to speak English to deliver stuff. And they're. I even read this amazing story about this woman who figured out how to do identity theft for delivery services. So what
what?
she was doing was she was oh, well, because one of the things apparently that happens when you're a delivery driver is you get access to people's IDs. So she
Huh.
was basically copying them and then stealing their identities and then renting them out to other illegal alien delivery drivers uh, for a few $100 a month, and she was raking in like $10,000 a month or something at her
Oh.
height. And it's just a good thing she wasn't using these identities to steal anything. So,
Mm.
Yeah.
okay, thank you. But, you know, she's basically enabling all of her fellow illegal aliens to get jobs by spoofing, Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and all these other delivery services. So,
Mm. Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
this is the kind of thing they've been doing. The other thing aspect of this is, so to me, there's a huge difference between the voting process and registration process here in Texas versus California. So California, starting in the early 90s, they passed a law called the motor voter law where they made it really easy to register to vote. Basically, all you had to do was fill out a postcard and send it in. And for a while, you could find these postcards all over the place anywhere. And
Right.
that
Mm.
was when I first came of age and first started voting. So I thought, oh, hey, I should register to vote. So I did. And then I would forget whether or not I had ever sent in the postcard. So I'd come across another one and I'd go, gee, I can't remember if I did this. So I'd fill it out again and send it in. Well, then when I went to go vote at my local polling place, they found me on the printout of the voter registration rolls multiple times under multiple variations of my name because I didn't remember how I had spelled, my name. What did I say? I was Tim Starr or Timothy Starr? Or did I use my middle name or my middle initial, etc.?
Mm.
So, that's how bad it was. There was no ID requirement. There was no,
Wow.
no citizenship check. All they do
Well,
is they
that's
ask you,
that's crazy that there's no
yeah,
citizenship check to vote in the
Mm.
yeah,
election.
Mm.
exactly. And then since then, they've legalized ballot harvesting in California, which basically means that somebody can help you fill out your ballot with you and then turn it in for you. And they can do this as many times as they want. They can turn in, as many ballots as they can get. And so basically that's what they've been doing. Every time they get, a new person coming across the border, they, send people to pal up with them and say, hey, it's great that you're here now. We're going to help you, get situated. And we're also going to help you vote because now you can vote here. They don't know any better because They're not from here. They don't speak the language all that well, but
Mhm.
a ballot harvester can help them fill out a ballot and turn it in for them, and suddenly they've voted Democrat.
Yeah, that's nuts. Oh,
Whereas, so in
shit.
Texas, you have to show ID,
Yeah.
has to be a driver's license. I was actually annoyed at the process of getting a driver's license here in Texas when I moved here because um, you have to show proof of citizenship, which that in itself I don't mind, but it has to be either your passport or your birth certificate. And my passport had just expired.
Mhm.
So they didn't allow it. And I was like, wait, my citizenship didn't expire.
Yeah,
You know,
obviously.
it was valid. I'm still a citizen, it proves that I was. No, no, it has to be valid. So I had to call up my mother and have her FedEx me my birth certificate from California so I could go get my driver's license, you
Oh,
know.
jeez.
And of course, that has nothing to do with driving, but it's proof of citizenship.
Mm.
Yeah, in Texas, you show your proof, your ID, your proof of citizenship. My wife couldn't vote because she hasn't gotten her Texas ID yet. But in
Oh,
California, that would not have been a problem. We've
Right.
been busy. She's been sick, but in California, no problem. I've heard stories about
Well, she could
people
have
who,
voted twice in California, or like as many
yeah,
times as she wanted.
precisely. Yeah, and when we were in Colorado before this, one of the reasons we moved, they changed it so that you didn't even have to live in the district where you were voting. You could go same day of the election to the polling station and say you were moving there that day, and they had to let you vote.
hmm. Funny.
Okay, that's strange.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
this
Yeah,
is the
something. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
these are the kind of shenanigans they're pulling, and there's a stat that I saw people mentioning that after Pennsylvania, every swing state that Trump won after that was one where voter ID is required. So
Yes.
basically, Harris is winning the states mostly that do not require voter ID, and Trump won the ones that do.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
seems like Trump's not even in the swing states, but just in states in general where voter ID is required, his percentage
Yep.
of, his share of percentage went up pretty much in all of them.
Yeah. Now, I think Pennsylvania is not a voter ID required state. So I don't want to say for sure about that one.
Ah,
But
okay. But the rest are, like Michigan and stuff, probably.
yeah, exactly right. Because recently Michigan had a Republican governor and legislature, so they were able to pass some good laws there that the Democrats haven't been able to reverse.
Right.
So, so I think Trump is definitely going to get the economy going again. It's been really bad here, and I'm in Texas. Texas is doing fairly well compared to a lot of the country,
Mm-hmm.
right? But even here in Texas, we've been feeling it. Now, I think he's going to allow fracking to happen again big time. I really liked what he had to say about lowering our energy costs as much as he possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm all for that. I think that's going to be a good thing across the board. Uh, I love the idea of having some serious deregulation and cost cutting at the federal spending level because that's desperately needed. One of the things I keep pointing out to people who complain about our military spending is right now, the US federal deficit is way higher than the US military budget. We could
Mm,
literally
Yes.
cut the US military budget to zero and we'd still have a deficit. Okay.
mm, mm, yeah.
Last I checked, 70% of the federal budget is transfer payments, taking money from some people and giving it to other people, whether that be Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, welfare, whatever. Maybe justified, maybe not, but it's 70% of the budget. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, that's
we
massive. I
have
don't I
to
don't think
figure
even
out,
New Zealand is that bad. Like that's a massive percentage.
yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing you got to remember here is that the majority of the baby boom generation is now retired.
Yes.
Right.
It's the biggest generation in American history, and they're all on Social Security now.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Right. Right. With little to like prop them up and stuff. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not earning big time the way they were before they retired.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
so we've got to figure out a way to cut spending wherever we can. And
mm.
I'm not saying that is where I would start, but one way or the other, it's got to happen.
Yeah, you got to
I mean,
cut
I
something,
know,
right?
yeah,
Oh
and I know
yeah.
one of the great stories about where you guys are in New Zealand is you already went through this process in the 80s, right? You reached the point where 100% roughly of annual tax revenue was just going to pay the interest on the national debt, right?
Mm, mhm,
So we're on a path approaching that. We're heading in that direction. And that's just not going to be something we're going to be able to do. There's
mm,
only, you know, a few ways out of that. One is to cut spending, which is, I think, what the best option. That's what we need to do. The other is to raise taxes, which is just going to kill economic growth and probably not even work. And the
mm,
other is to inflate the currency, which is what, Biden ended up doing without realizing that was what was going to happen. But, you
mhm,
know, this is what happens when you let, economic morons run rampant.
mm. So would you say the remedy is to do what you mentioned earlier Trump was going to do with like multiple sorts of regulations and cuts and incentives all at once? Is that the
Yeah.
solution?
Yeah. I think that's what he's going to have to do. So we actually stole a good policy from Canada back when Canada had a conservative prime minister, Stephen Harper.
Mhm,
Um, I believe this was his policy, but maybe it was somebody after him, where they basically said that for every new regulation, you had to cut two old ones, and they had to be ones of equivalent economic impact, right? So you have an economic impact statement for every regulation. You want to pass a new one, you've got to cut twice as much uh, regulatory impact in order to pass any new ones. Trump already did that the first time. All he's got to do is reissue that executive order, and that'll start happening.
hmm,
And that was cutting regulations like crazy. Because what do regulators want to do? They want to issue new regulations. What do
hmm.
they not care about? Old regulations. you know,
Yes.
Right, right.
Like, oh, this is old. Okay, well, we can't take credit for any old ones, so forget about that one. Who cares? What we,
Yeah.
we, we want new ones.
Yeah.
Um, so they're going to do that. Uh, I don't know exactly how they're going to tackle the overall spending problem, but supposedly Elon Musk is going to be put in charge of that, and hopefully he'll do well. Um,
Really? Wow. Elon Musk. That's okay. 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 I mean,
yeah,
he's like a
Musk has
huge.
been jokingly calling it the Department of Government Efficiency, which spells out Doge.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that.
Oh gosh, that's yeah. I don't know why it kind of freaks me out. I mean, it's kind of like an interesting times we do live, but it's kind of like I hear he's like buddying up with Ron Paul, and they're gonna have a discussion on the Liberty Report sometime.
Yeah,
How they're gonna
um,
that'll be
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And on foreign policy, I am not the world's biggest Ron Paul fan, but when it comes to
Yeah.
government spending, I think that he's got it right a lot of the
Okay.
time.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that those are all aspects that I can comment on. Also, foreign policy. I was saying this that
Mhm. Mhm.
I know Trump's going to be a hell of a lot better on the Middle East
Mhm.
than Biden and Harris have been because they've just been awful. Um, Last I heard, Trump supposedly had a meeting with Netanyahu where he basically told Netanyahu to, do what you got to do,
Mhm.
meaning, hit Iran really hard. Now, I saw a statement today saying that supposedly Trump was encouraging Netanyahu to take out Iran's oil facilities,
Mhm.
which would be totally fine with me, but I'm not sure that whatever they say is what is going to actually happen because if you're going to do something like that, you probably don't want to advertise it in advance.
Oh.
I think Trump was already a hell of a lot better on Iran than Biden and
Mhm.
Harris, so that'll be a lot better. He was already, a lot harder on China. Now that's one area where I think Biden didn't ease up on China as much as the rest.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, in fact, he imposed sanctions on the Chinese semiconductor industry.
Yeah.
So and I think that's a good thing, basically. I think that'll continue, and hopefully we'll see more stuff like that because I think China. Everyone agrees that China is a very serious threat, except the Democrats.
Well, that's where they get their money from. So
Yeah, exactly. Right. It is. And it's not just money. I mean, it turned out that Dianne Feinstein's longtime driver was a Chinese spy.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
You know,
jeez.
the was it
What are the
Congressman's
chances?
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Congress,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Congressman Swalwell got that briefing from the FBI about his Chinese girlfriend, saying, "Oh, guess what? She was a Chinese spy, and she was cheating on you, dude, with every other local government official she could meet, she could hook up with."
Oh
You
no. Oh no.
know, she quickly fled the country and went back to China. Hasn't been heard from since. Um, there was what is it, another California, San Francisco Chinese American government official. Was it Leland Yee? Turns out he was involved in a gun running
Yeah, that was
operation
crazy, and he was like
against
pushing
the
for gun
U.S.
control in the
Yeah,
legislature,
right,
and he
exactly.
was
Yeah, no guns for
essentially a
you, but
yeah, he was a gun dealer.
yeah, yeah,
Jeez.
exactly. He's hooked up with the Chinese gangs, the triads in San Francisco, which are smuggling weapons from China into the country.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm old enough to remember when back in San Francisco, the only conservatives that could get elected to the local government were Chinese. So it hasn't always been like this,
Oh my
but
god.
it's been like that for a long time. Yeah, this is like in the back in the 90s, early 90s. It's been completely taken over by mainland China, the CCP,
What
since
on
then.
what on earth? What the heck? The San Francisco area has been. I don't think I was aware of that. What was? So I guess. Well,
Yeah.
maybe that's a discussion for another time. But that's crazy. Did you hear about that, Hector? I mean, I knew it was
Oh,
bad.
I
Like
know
a
it's
lot
pretty
of.
bad there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So San Francisco hasn't had a Republican mayor since I think what, the 50s.
Uh,
Same for Berkeley. Um, it's just been, taken over uh, immensely in the past couple of decades. Um,
damn,
yeah, they have,
that's insane.
it has one of the biggest Chinese American communities in the country. There's one of the oldest Chinatowns in the country, and uh, that's always been uh, a den of corruption, one way or the other. The only good thing about it is that it used to be anti-communist, uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that hasn't been the case for a long time.
That's weird. Yeah, that's very strange. Okay, so it sounds like you're bullish on foreign policy. It sounds like you're economically bullish.
Yeah,
But
and the one area I don't know how much you want to get into it is I do have qualms about Trump's Ukraine policy, but I think there's
mhm,
a lot of unknowns there.
yeah, no, I do want to. Before we discuss that, I do want to get to that. But before we discuss that, uh, what about like immigration and specifically mass deportations? They seem to be ramping up with this. What was it? The 60 Minutes guy, the head of ICE. He was like Tom Homan. Homan was asked, about his Trump's deportation policy, and he said, "Well, you can basically just deport them and their families." And then you have talk of actually, I'm not a fan of Vance myself. I'm very skeptical, but I was quite surprised. Not that I'm any more trusting of him. I'll
Yeah.
just have to see. I've got no secret keys or back passageways, but I yeah, even he was saying like, yeah, we're kind of committed to this in an interview, and he was saying, we just have to, it's obviously we're not just gonna, we're not just gonna wing it, but we can, learn along the way, and we'll start with 1 million, and then we'll progress on from that. So yeah, yeah, to reiterate,
Yeah, yeah.
what's your immigration immigration policy and the mass
Mhm.
deportations? What are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Right. Well, like I said, I historically have not been the world's greatest immigration hawk. I'm a bit of
Oh
a
yeah.
recent convert on that, but to the extent I have followed it, what I would say is that um, in existing U.S. law, there's a hell of a lot more options for carrying out deportations of people that are not here legally than have been done historically. So, for instance, um, if you're a legal immigrant, you're not supposed to go on welfare. You're supposed to
Makes
have
sense, right?
somebody, yeah, you're supposed to have
Yeah.
somebody, but not only that, you're supposed to have somebody who vouches for you, saying that if you become destitute, they will support you so you don't go on welfare. So in
Mm.
theory, the government could go after every uh, legal immigrant who's on welfare and go after the people that vouch for them, saying, "Hey, you owe us money." You
Ooh, yeah,
There's
yeah.
also provisions about how you can't basically oppose, U.S. Law and U.S. values if you're here, essentially, on uh, it's not literally probation, but I'm going to say metaphorically on probation from another country. You don't have as unrestricted a free speech right as you would if you were a legal U.S. resident or legal U.S. citizen. So, there's a lot of people even who have been granted citizenship that could be stripped for it if they, have been involved in extreme anti-American activities. So,
Really?
yep.
I
Oh
I
yeah.
s- I saw there was that law on anti-communist control. I think it was
Yep.
Article 50. So something like that. Okay, that's interesting. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anti, yeah. Hmm.
So, I think that there's a lot they can do here, and there's precedent for it also. President Eisenhower deported something like 1 million illegal aliens back in the 50s.
Wow.
Carter uh, collected a whole bunch of people from Castro's Mariel boat lift. Castro did the same thing that has been done lately, where they emptied the prisons and sent them here. Caused riots in Florida for weeks in Miami.
Wow.
But a lot of them were basically rounded up and they were put in tent cities temporarily until their status could be determined. And a bunch of them were sent back to Cuba.
Wow. 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 So there you
So,
go. Hmm.
and that was Carter. All right. Carter is, he was, by no means a hardcore conservative.
Yeah. Right. Wow. Interesting. Interesting. So
So I think there's a lot of options there. They seem fairly committed to it. I'm pretty sure they're going to carry out some version of that, and a lot of it can be done by executive order. The thing that really frustrated a lot of us about Biden is Biden kept saying, "Oh, I can't. It has to be. I need Congress to give me a law." We're like, okay, when you took office, you rescinded about 90 executive orders that Trump had on the books that were
yeah.
dealing with this problem, and I have to give Trump credit. I didn't think he was going to make a difference, but he really did. He really did cut down illegal immigration across the southern border a lot.
I think he
And he,
actually, I think this is true. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but he actually did more deportations than people that came in illegally, I believe.
Hmm.
that's possible. I don't know, but I know entries were way down eventually. It took him a while to get all the pieces in place, but once he had all the pieces of the puzzle in place, about halfway through his term,
Mhm.
the illegal border crossings started to go way down. But then they just went up enormously under Biden. I had no idea it could ever get this high. It's been something like 10 million since Biden
Yeah.
took office.
So it's like you got 10 million people that he needs to get rid of in his 4-year term. So, I mean, just do the math. That's, 2.5 million a year. So the 1
Yeah,
million isn't really enough.
yeah, I
Mhm.
agree.
Oh, oh, they should be back. Sorry.
a
Oh,
problem.
sorry, I'm back. I pressed the wrong button and accidentally closed the tab. I'm
You're
back now.
back.
Yeah.
You almost deported yourself there,
Yeah, I
mate.
deported myself from the show, but
Yeah,
anyways.
Someone came and grabbed you, deported
Yeah.
Victor.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
to give you guys a sense of what the situation is like, the street crime in the big Democrat cities has just gotten awful in the past several years.
Mm,
I have friends in New York City who tell me they basically can't go out at night because they're, you know, uh, single women, retired, and they're in Hispanic neighborhoods, and they'll get attacked by gang members unless they have an adult male escorting them who's armed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I have family members who work in the San Francisco Bay Area in in the arts. And my mother's a longtime opera fan in San Francisco,
Oh wow.
and it's no longer safe for those opera goers and theater goers to walk to the opera and to the theater at night or to and
Wow.
from. I heard a story about a little old lady who had been a school teacher in my old school district who went to go to one of these venues there, and she showed up bloody and bruised and bleeding because she had gotten punched out on the way to the opera.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah, so this is
Yeah.
the type of street crime that has been happening there. um, it's really horrible. I haven't been back in years, but the last time I went was for an industry conference. It was downtown in San Francisco. And let's see, people's cell phones were being stolen from the bar, from the countertop. If you left your cell phone on the bar, it would be gone.
Mhm.
There were hookers hitting on guys in the lobby of the hotels, and this was a nice hotel. It
Yeah.
was like a $200 a night hotel or more.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
it's it's gotten bad.
Yeah.
It's not. The people I know that have to work there. One friend I had who was working downtown, he would take the train up from the peninsula, get off the train, and he'd walk a couple of blocks to his office. He said he was literally trying not to step in human poop every single step of the way
Yeah, it's real
from the
bad.
train
Yeah.
station to his office. Every single step of the way.
That's so crazy, man. That is,
Yeah,
yeah. Just one day you wake up, there's, criminals, hookers and poop everywhere, you know? It's kind of amazing how quickly this has all happened, but
exactly.
And
yeah.
then
Yeah,
when Xi Jinping visits, they clean up for like a week and then
right.
let it go
Exactly.
back.
Right, which just proves they can do it if they want to, if they think they have a good reason to. It's not some inexorable,
It's actually quite
fact of
easy to
life.
solve, right? You just arrest the
Precisely.
criminals.
Yeah, and I remember in the '90s we actually had he was a Democrat, but the police chief Frank Jordan got elected mayor, and he adopted a very simple policy for the homeless people, which is that you can't sleep on the street.
Mhm.
You can go to a shelter. They would take you to a homeless shelter. You could sleep in the shelter, or you could move on, but no sleeping on the street. And it worked great.
Mm. Oh, there you go.
And this is not the most tyrannical fascist measure that's ever been imposed.
Mhm.
You know, oh, we'll take you to a shelter so you can sleep in the shelter.
Yeah,
But,
very reasonable.
since
Jeez.
then, they've basically legalized street camping because they've said it's a cruel and unusual punishment to ban street camping. The, the homeless activists have been handing out tents and sleeping bags like crazy. So they have these tent cities in LA. Also, they've got they're being the activists, the NGOs are donating generators to them, so they have generators to run, so they can have electricity in their tent cities full of homeless people, and they're running these extension cords and power strips all over the place, and some of these are shorting out and causing fires in the tent cities.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a hazard.
Yeah,
What?
it's this huge, enormous public health hazard.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, of course.
And this,
Jeez.
this is basically the flagship Democrat state that they wanted to take nationwide with the exact same policies.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like they're literally trying to turn it into a third world, yeah, one of these like Venezuela or
Yeah,
how Cuba was or
yeah,
like yeah,
oh yeah. And
seems
it got so bad. There was another great indicator of this I read about. The pollsters were trying to do focus groups before the election, asking people what they thought of all these crazy Democrat policies. And they found that if they accurately described the policies, the people they were polling didn't believe them.
Yeah, we've heard this. We heard
mm.
this. I think Ed McConnor told us.
Yeah,
It's
like,
like,
no, that can't be. Like, but no, it really is. Yeah, there you go. There's one of those tent cities. They've got them all over the place down there.
Wow.
And I saw, I've seen documentaries where they're asking people, like, "Why are you here?" I'm like, "Oh, because it has nice weather, and I don't want to work for a living, and I can live here, and I like taking drugs every day." A lot of them,
Yeah.
you know, you know,
Jeez.
is another big part of the puzzle is that a lot of California. So they lost a federal case over prison overcrowding, and because of that, they were under a mandatory federal court order to release a large percent of their prison population. I think it was 40% of the population.
Wow.
And a lot of the people in prison had drug problems. Well, in prison, you can get drugs, but it's relatively costly and difficult. On the outside, it's nowhere near as costly and difficult. Plus, in prison, you can actually get drug treatment, and it's virtually impossible to get drug treatment in California today outside of prison.
Wow. Yeah.
It's
In
just not
fact, they
done.
encouraged. Remember, they encouraged them to actually. They were handing out crack pipes. They were like, "Oh, here's your state mandated crack pipe." Do you guys remember
Yeah.
that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
actually, when I first got started in San Francisco in the Libertarian Party there, they had just run a ballot initiative to legalize hypodermic needle exchange. So
Hmm.
this was a good thing as originally conceived, and then immediately the local city government screwed it all up. The original theory was that this is a way to stop junkies from spreading AIDS, because if you're a junkie and you're sharing needles, then you either could be HIV infected or the people you're sharing needles with could be HIV infected. So, you could spread AIDS that way. Well, as soon as this thing actually got on the ballot, the local government. It's called the Board of Supervisors. San Francisco is a city and a county, so it's a
Yeah.
city and county board of supervisors. They said, "Oh, this is great, but we're going to do our own version of it." So what they did is they replaced it with subsidized needles, basically for everybody.
Mm, mm, all right.
And they basically, the way I put it is, they took over with this ethic that
Mm,
they developed for AIDS. So with AIDS, you basically say, okay, sex is a natural thing that people do, but sometimes if you do it in an unsafe way, you could spread this horrible disease. So we need to train everybody how to, have sex in a safe fashion,
jeez.
right? So they decided to do the same thing with intravenous drugs. And so this is basically, they call it, what is it, harm reduction now. They have this whole concept of, safe drug injection centers and stuff. I don't know how many of them there are. Some places have them. Some they just talk about them, but they don't have them yet. But they're basically saying, this will help junkies shoot up and not overdose.
Right. Yeah.
And if they overdose, we'll save them. Well, okay, saving people
The
is nice.
precious junkies. What would we be without the junkies?
Yeah, right, exactly.
We
You
need to
know,
give them generators and tents and drugs.
yeah, precisely. So it's coddling junkies. Now, I'm all
Wow.
for people that actually need to be saved from overdosing getting saved from overdosing. My wife accidentally overdosed on one of her pain medications because she had a fever and she didn't realize how many she was taking. So we
Mhm,
had to go to the ER and they had to figure out that she had accidentally OD'd and they had to give her a Narcan injection and it saved her life. I'm glad that happened. I'm glad we have that.
mhm,
But
mhm.
it should be the exception in rare extreme cases like that. It should not be this general policy of,
Subsidized
we're going
drug
to have.
use. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. This open air drug scene where you can, shoot up all you want. You can sleep in your tent right there.
Mhm.
Um, these tent cities have horrible rape problems.
Yeah.
Oh.
Unsurprising, considering everyone's just
Mm.
Yeah,
sleeping in a tent in the middle of a city and
Yeah,
everyone's
yeah,
on
criminals
crack.
and
Yeah.
a lot of them
yeah,
criminals on crack. Yeah. Mm.
yeah, exactly. They're filthy. They're unsafe. Um, and that's what they wanted to go nationwide with. They already started doing some of this stuff in Denver before I left Colorado.
Mhm,
It's one of the reasons I left.
mhm.
I had a friend who was living in downtown Denver, and he left right before me because all that was happening. So
Mhm, mhm,
we
mhm.
really dodged a bullet here. Hopefully,
Do you think that would be grounds for like everything we've just been talking about with this new crazy phenomenon that we're seeing with like drugged up criminals camping out on the street. Could that be like grounds for group or mass deportations for people as sort of like an
Mhm.
anti-American activity because
Yeah,
like
like
Yeah,
dealing drugs. Yeah.
dealing
yeah,
drugs, raping
in,
people,
yeah, in one way or another, yeah. I'm not the world's biggest drug warrior either. Ultimately, I think we need to legalize a hell of a lot more than we have. But even then, the way Democrats have been legalizing drugs, they've been screwing that up as much as they can too. When they legalized recreational marijuana in California, they taxed it so much that black market weed is still cheaper.
Oh, yeah,
So it's completely defeating the entire point. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. Make actually empowers the drug lords.
yeah.
That's
Last I
great.
heard, it used to be that the Mexican cartels controlled the pot trade in California. I just heard now it's apparently the Chinese gangs.
Yeah, right. Because the Chinese, they supply a lot of those very powerful drugs like fentanyl, and then the
Yeah.
Mexicans distribute it and
Yeah, and
take it
that's
away.
really nasty stuff. Now, I love pointing out to people, if you can name the single most effective U.S. government policy we have ever had to reduce smuggling of, controlled intoxicants into the country, what do you think that is? And
Mm.
if you're a libertarian like me, it's obvious. You know the answer. It's ending alcohol prohibition. Right?
Right, right.
Bootlegging stopped immediately.
Mm, mm, mm,
You
mm.
know,
Right. Interesting. Yeah,
and
true.
bathtub gin stopped immediately. People getting literally blind drunk from drinking methanol stopped immediately.
Mm, mm.
To me, fentanyl is the new
Right,
bathtub gin.
right, right.
There's no reason why any of us should be taking that outside of you're having surgery.
Yeah.
Mm, mm,
Well,
mm.
yeah, I don't think
That's
fentanyl should be legalized for the public. I think that's probably going a bit far.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying that either. I'm
Yeah.
saying that the milder stuff is where we should start.
Mm,
And there actually is some good data on some of that, as long as you don't coddle the junkies.
mm.
This is the real problem: is that Democrats basically figured out that as long as people all they care about is getting their next fix, and you let them get their next fix, then they're a reliable voting bloc.
Yeah.
Right. That's so terrible. It's like a plague of these hordes of I can't remember. I thought it was sort of like a motif, but it's like the Huns or something. We've got these like savage,
Hmm.
crazed, drugged up, sort of freaky people, and it's like ah ha ha, like sort of like
Yeah,
Saruman and the orcs or something. They say, "Behold
yeah,
my voting block! We want
yeah,
human
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
flesh."
exactly,
It's
exactly. Yeah,
freaky, man. It's freaky. Yeah, it's
it
like, oh,
is.
you
It
think,
is.
oh,
It is.
California, like beaches, sunshine, palm trees, nice,
Hmm.
friendly people with good food and nice sort of surfer, friendly sort of bayside culture. It's like
Yeah,
you go there, it's like the Democrats literally turn it into Mordor or something. It's like,
yeah.
oh man,
In a lot of ways, yeah.
it
That's
seemed like such a
very,
fun
very
place.
true.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and it completely belies the image that California has as the legacies from its past, and that it still likes to pretend is applicable.
Mm, mm,
But I've reached the point now where when I watch old movies that were filmed in California, I get really nostalgic. Like, hey, look, it used to be nice there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
That's so. Hopefully he can clean California up, and if that's
Yeah,
possible, under grounds of anti-American. That's pretty cool. How I didn't actually know that. I knew about the anti-communist control, but
yep,
in terms
yep,
of anti-Americanism, which I guess is
yep.
anti-communism is
Well,
anyway. That's
for
mm,
instance, I'm not the world's biggest expert on exactly what the legal details of this are, but
mhm,
as far as I'm concerned, if we've got a foreign exchange student going to college here, running around campus, cheering for Hamas,
mhm.
um, they need to go.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, Hamas is like a designated like terrorist organization, so
You'd
Yeah.
you don't
think,
really.
I know, but we went from, another thing that, I saw something from Trump where he was talking about cracking down on the, drug importation into the country.
Mhm.
That also applies to a lot of terrorism too, because a lot of terrorists fund themselves with drugs. In fact, there
Yes.
was a fairly high-profile case where Hezbollah was doing money laundering through a bank. I believe it was HSBC, which is a Chinese-owned bank, and the Justice Department prosecuted for them for it. But Obama basically let him get away with it with a slap on the wrist. And
Mm.
that's the kind of thing where I have a hard time imagining that Trump's going to be letting anyone get away with a slap on the wrist for that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, he's been vocal about that in the past. So yeah, that's a good book. I haven't actually read the whole thing. I need to finish it, but Red Cocaine by Joseph Douglas. Yeah,
Yeah,
documents a
I've
lot.
seen it. I've never read it. I'm familiar with the thesis. It looks good. It's one of those things I've always wanted to read,
Mm,
but never gotten around to it. My reading list has literally hundreds of books on it that I haven't read
yeah,
yet. So,
I know you're an absolute reading machine, Tim. That's awesome. That's really
yeah, I'm usually in the middle of about a half a dozen books at once.
Oh my god, that's incredible. That's cool, man. You're
Yeah,
like the chameleon of books, both
yeah.
that's
Uh,
awesome. Or
I'm on the verge of finishing one about the Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union that just came out, which
Oh yeah, that's
is
cool.
quite good.
oh wow, interesting. Yeah, that's be interesting to hear a review from or something like that.
Yeah.
That's why you should review books. They'll be quite cool.
I've thought about that. It's a good idea. I, I find I do best when I have people asking me questions, so I know what to say. So I'm glad we're doing
Mm.
this.
Maybe that's something we could facilitate then in future. That's because that sounds like an interesting book I'd want to
Hmm.
learn about.
Sure.
But okay, so it sounds like you're pretty bullish on Trump. And
I
now,
am.
oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just agreeing with you. Yeah, I am
Oh,
at
yeah.
this point in time.
Well, that's good. That's heartening to know someone who's very, very well read that is actually bullish on Trump because we've seen a lot of little teenage girls who probably have just the most reading they do is reading the sub captions on TikTok and they're screaming their hair out. They're literally screaming. A lot of them are shaving their head. It's bizarre. I know there's a lot of like mental illness and stuff amongst the youth, but I mean to me it's just seeing it on X and wherever else is it's just really quite alarming to me to see how again like these hordes of people going, literally Trump derangement syndrome.
It
It's
is. It's
freaky.
pretty astounding. I know that there's been some research done which has found that leftists are something like twice as likely to have actual mental illness diagnoses than
I mean, you just have to look at
conservatives.
Twitter and look at all the stuff they put in
Yeah,
their bio.
right. And then it's also encouraged and cultivated in them a lot.
Yes.
Um,
Mm, it's too
and
bad. It's like where are their parents? Like really, these are young people, and it's like
yeah,
what happened? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, right.
mhm,
And again, I'm quite sympathetic to people that actually have real mental illnesses. Um, one of my friends is actually the chief doctor for the California Bureau of Prisons, chief psychiatrist. So
mm,
he deals with people who have real mental illnesses on a regular basis, and a lot of them are in prison for violent crimes that they've committed because they were mentally ill. So it is a real problem. I don't want to dismiss it, but again, why would we be wanting to encourage it in people, especially
yeah.
young people, and inculcate it? This
Mm,
is another thing where I'm actually pretty happy about Trump saying he's going to ban, basically the medical mutilation of children
oh,
based on the
Yeah, of
theory
course.
that the wrong gender.
mm,
Um, I call this, the left wing white Westerners version of female genital mutilation in Islam.
right.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
basically is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm,
it's male and female as well, so it's
Well,
pretty
that's the
bad.
thing. They improved on it. They made it profitable, and they made it apply to both, boys and girls.
mm.
And
It's for the communist religion, and as opposed to like Islam or I guess
Yeah,
Judaism
true, true.
or any of these other
yeah,
like some African
right,
kind of religion
exactly.
where it's for I don't know whatever they to be clean or for whatever reason, but instead it's the religion, the hidden religion is,
Yeah,
or maybe not
yeah,
so hidden, is communism,
yeah.
the Marxist indoctrination
Yeah,
of
well, yeah,
kids.
and
And
I think it basically comes to they've done this. I think it comes to from this analysis they've done that says basically if you're a normal, well-adjusted, happily married person with a family, you're not going to vote for them.
Yeah.
yeah, 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 because
So
go ahead, sorry.
they're going to do everything they possibly can to make sure that you don't turn out that way.
Yeah, I mean, talking about bending the rules and stuff like that. I mean, the Democrats have really, I mean, with that thing in particular, have really pushed it so far that I feel like, I mean, it was such a bizarre thing that I think a lot of people were voting with that in mind as well. That is just so insane. How can you anyone ever think to support such a thing? And it's been going on for years. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's like
exactly.
yeah, I mean, I think like we all like it's insane. It's almost hard to think about how crazy it is. It's like conservatives, nationalists, libertarians, whoever you are, like it's kind of like we need to bear that in mind when we are considering, moving the anti-Americans out. You know, it's like because I
Yeah,
mean that they're quite happy to go scorched earth on us. It's like man, but let's just have a nice country, and that entails you know doing something with these people. Of course, in a way that's humane, but we've just
yeah,
that's gone way too far. Like this
yeah.
is
I agree, and I would never say that anyone should be deported just for being transgender, for instance. I think that
mhm,
people who really you know, feel that way need to be respected and their rights need to be protected just like everybody else.
mhm,
But there's no way that translates into them having the authority to dictate to us, how we should address them,
mm,
you know,
mm,
etc.
mm,
My
mm.
sister has a great line about that. It says, what is the big deal with your pronouns? The pronouns are what people call you when you're not there. So why do I care what you call me when I'm not there?
Yeah, yeah. True. That's excuse me. That's a good point. But yeah, it's like we wouldn't if we just stopped this new religion from metastasizing, then we probably wouldn't get these strange sorts of things that we're
Yeah,
seeing in
yeah.
people's minds. So
I liked what Trump was saying about making legal remedies for people who've been through these medical procedures to sue the people who did it to them. I think
mm,
that's a good thing also because there's never been any scientific research proving that this was good for mental health. There's
yeah.
never been any scientific basis for it. It was all fraudulent. People were basically lied into it. They were told, oh, if you don't let your kid do this, your kid's, 1,000 times more likely to kill themselves or something like that. Well, at
When
the
it's
last,
the opposite, actually, if they go through with that,
precisely,
they actually, yeah, it's
yeah,
way more. Yeah,
yeah.
it's terrible.
This is-
Yeah, it's shocking.
yeah, and my ultimate argument on that is, how come we didn't see this massive drop in the suicide rate once that all of
Yeah.
these transgender medical procedures started happening? We
Mm,
didn't see that. It didn't happen. There was no reduction in teenage suicides due to
mm,
this.
mm,
So there was no, secret batch of children that were killing themselves because, they
mhm,
were in the wrong body. It just
mm,
wasn't happening. It
mm,
was all
mm.
made up. It's a social what do they call it? Social contagion.
Yeah. Almost like its own sort of mass formation
Well, it's a mind
psychosis.
virus, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
mind virus. Isn't that
exactly.
amazing how it just kind of
Exactly.
and it really
It's a
goes to show that humans on some level we're all connected, and it's important to understand that when you're kind of theorizing or
yeah,
dealing with political philosophy,
yeah,
we're actually
yeah,
more connected than we realize. And yeah.
precisely.
So that's yeah. I hope that's a chapter that people can just get closed once and for all, and we can just move on and normalcy, once again. But
Yeah,
yes, so yeah, so I'm really chomping at the bit to get into how a Trump victory will affect Ukraine. We've seen a lot
yeah,
of back and forth about what a Trump administration will look like for the success of Ukraine. What do you think we will likely see from the Trump administration, and how? Yeah, I guess. Well, I'll just ask that. What
Mhm.
do you think will? What are you confident that we'll likely see from this up and coming Trump administration, Tim?
Right. So, very good question. I should probably start with the most recent thing I just read about this tonight, which is not much, but it's something, which is that there's apparently some contractor working on the Trump campaign who said something about how, we're not going to get Ukraine any of its territory back that it's lost.
I saw that too.
And,
Yeah.
and Trump immediately said he doesn't speak for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh,
I
really? Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
So
thank God.
Trump
Okay.
Trump's keeping his options open there. I don't think that's a guarantee that either Ukraine's gonna get its territory back, some or all of it, and I don't think it's a guarantee that it won't. I think that's still an open question at this point.
Mhm.
Um, but it's, I think, a good sign that he's not foreclosing the option, and that's good negotiation, right? You wanna keep all your options available and on the table when you're discussing these things.
Mhm.
Um, the closest guesses I've seen to what Trump might do, there's an arbitration technique that you use if you have a contract dispute and you go to private arbitration, which is the arbitrator says to each of the parties involved, okay, I want each of you to submit a possible resolution of this case to me secretly in private, and I'm going to pick one of them, and I'm not going to tell you which one. And what this does is it, terrifies each of the parties to the case, to the dispute, that if they don't come up with a reasonable solution, the arbitrator's going to pick the other one.
Hmm. Hmm.
Trump's version of this, as far as I can tell thus far, and it's only been hinted at, is to say that and I don't think Trump himself has even said this, but some people in his camp have said this, like Pompeo did. Even though Trump just announced that Pompeo is not going to be part of the new administration, okay, whatever. He had his chance. I liked what he did, most of it, although I've heard some negative things about him just recently. But at
Mhm.
any rate, what Pompeo was saying, the most likely option is that he's going to say that there should be essentially a freeze in place for
Mhm.
20 years. Uh, And if Russia doesn't accept that, then we're going to lift all restrictions on US weapons for Ukraine as far as what targets they can hit, and we're going to give them all the weapons that they want.
Do you think that's likely to happen, or?
I think it's what I think is really unlikely is that Russia would accept that kind of deal.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think that Putin has locked himself into a position of being fully committed to total victory at all costs
Yeah.
in Ukraine.
Mhm.
Do
I
you know
don't
if
think
that deal, like the one you mentioned, it will like have any terms on like whether Ukraine is able to join NATO or be military neutral, like anything like that, or is it mostly just to do
the
with
latest
territory?
version of it that I heard said no NATO membership for
Okay,
Ukraine
Okay.
for 20 years. Now,
right.
Oh.
I don't think that's as big
Well,
a
that's actually
deal.
like it probably would have taken 20 years for Ukraine to get ready to join NATO anyway, if it did join. So,
That's part of it. Also, um, so a lot of people, I think, misinterpret NATO membership. I'm in favor of NATO. Ideally, I would like Ukraine to be able to join NATO immediately. All right.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but a lot of people interpret NATO membership as this, absolute unconditional guarantee that if any member is attacked, essentially, then the United States going to come in and stomp their attacker to little bits.
Yeah. That's kind of like how
And
I was. Yeah.
that's not what the treaty actually says.
Yeah.
Okay, what the treaty says is any attack on any member is considered as an attack on all, but it leaves the options for
yeah.
responding up to each of the
Yeah,
members.
so it could be direct military involvement. It could be supplying weapons and intelligence. It's
Yeah,
sort of, whatever any military member sees fit.
right.
Mm.
So from my point of view on this, to me, it doesn't really matter whether Ukraine's actually a NATO member or not. we can do whatever we want to support them anyway.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Well, I
mhm.
mean,
It's like
like,
Mm,
if
yeah,
you're a
mm,
NATO member, there's a higher expectation of that. But I've been thinking to myself, if Ukraine was already a NATO member, what would we do differently? And what I think we should do is, doesn't really change whether or not I think they're in NATO or not.
mm. Okay.
I think we should be arming them to the teeth.
Mhm,
I think we should have been doing that for years.
mhm,
Trump,
mhm,
to his credit, was the first one to start selling weapons to Ukraine. Obama wouldn't do it,
mm.
yeah, it's
and
interesting how
Biden,
much people forget that.
yeah,
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
exactly.
Mm,
I remember when Ukraine was desperate for Javelin missiles, the
mhm,
anti-tank missiles, and Obama wouldn't sell them. And as soon as Trump took office, he said, "Okay, here you go. You can have your Javelins." You
mm,
Even when Biden first took office, before Putin started the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Biden was turning off the spigot of weapons support to Ukraine. Biden was lifting the sanctions of Nord Stream 2. Biden was right before, when we were convinced, based on our technical intelligence of the Russian military deployments, that they were going to invade. Biden ordered all of our U.S. personnel out of Ukraine. And that's
mm, mm,
removing what little tripwire defense we already had in the country.
mm,
You know,
mm.
Yeah, because there's like
basically telling
American and
Putin,
British and Canadian soldiers actually in Ukraine until right before the war started.
yeah, we had special forces trainers in there training the Ukrainian military, and they suddenly all had to leave. You know,
Yes.
okay, that basically cleared the field, making Putin think he could roll right in and take over. Uh,
Yeah, huge
it's
mistake there. Like, if you had 1,000
yeah,
Yeah.
American troops, 1,000 Canadian
yeah,
troops, he would have thought twice, right? And
yeah,
dragging America and
exactly,
NATO into the war directly.
exactly, exactly. I mean, the worst before the invasion of Ukraine in recent times was in Syria when Wagner attacked a bunch of U.S. troops out there. And we
Yeah.
checked with the Russians and said, "Hey, are these your guys?" And said, "Oh no, they're not our guys at all." And we said, "Okay, good. We'll take your word." And we killed 200 or 300 of them, and they didn't like that at all.
But why did they say that again? Why did they say they expected us not to do anything, or what?
Apparently, yeah. Apparently, they thought they could. And it turns out the brother of a friend of mine was involved in that operation on the U.S. side.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah. So that was, the Battle of Kashan. There it is. I forget what he was, either Army or Marines. I forget which, but he was one of the participants in that. Where so that happened under Trump. The way I put it out is Trump killed more Russians than Biden.
Yeah.
They were actually being killed by U.S. troops there. They weren't being killed by Ukrainians or some other ally. It was our guys
Yeah.
killing Wagnerites, and they're essentially Russian. They're GRU,
Mhm,
right? They're from the Russian military intelligence's deniable privatized proxy mercenary outfit, but it's all GRU people supported. My friend told me they were running the DNA on the dead Wagnerites in that battle, and they're all coming back as Russian special forces people that we knew about.
Oh,
Yeah, not really
wow.
that unsurprising, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, so right. So we think that Trump will be probably, yeah, but so do we think so we think that they're going to get the artillery, they'll get the rifle, they'll be armed to the teeth, more so now.
Well,
What's
I hope so. I can't say for sure because I'm just not that well connected, and then maybe it hasn't even been decided yet. But the other aspect of my answer to this is that Ukraine is not just fighting Russia; they're fighting Russia as supported by Iran and China and North Korea.
yeah.
And Trump's going to be a hell of a lot better on those people than Biden, a hell
Oh
of a
yeah.
lot tougher on them. So, how is Iran going to send drones and other weapons to Russia if Iran doesn't have any money, or if Iran knows they're going to be, blown the crap out of for, looking crosswise at anybody?
Mhm.
Um, you know, we're China, I think, is a bigger, more complicated problem to address. But again, North Korea is essentially a Chinese proxy. So North Korea, we could basically tell, to them to stop, and if they think we mean it, I'm pretty sure they will.
Yeah, do you think so? Okay, yeah, do you think with the Trump admin coming through, they're kind of like reconsidering anything? I mean, you said they're going all in for Ukraine, but do you think
Yeah.
they're kind of taking a step back with maybe North Korea because we know that that's like little China, basically.
So the only sort of backtracking I've seen thus far has been from Iran, where Iran has said, oh, we're not really pursuing nuclear weapons like we said
Hmm.
we would, no matter what. They're backtracking a bit. I think Qatar has just said they're kicking Hamas out of Qatar, which is, long overdue. But I honestly don't know why Qatar is our ally.
Yeah, it doesn't make
I
any
don't
sense when they host like, Taliban and Al Qaeda and all sorts, like pretty much every terrorist
precisely.
group under the sun.
Yeah. They're Iran's money launderer also.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
what the hell, Qatar? They're completely dependent on us for protection, and without oil, they'd have no money whatsoever. And I have a cousin who actually was stationed in Qatar for Exxon for 13 years. So he's told
Hmm.
me a little bit about what life is like there. Turns out if you're an American expat living and working there, and your teenage daughter gets pregnant, you better get her out of the country immediately, because
Oh,
otherwise she's in big trouble.
why? If oh,
Because
yeah, go ahead.
it's illegal.
To take sorry, to have to maybe I missed that, maybe, sorry, I'm a little
Premarital
slow.
premarital sex not legal.
Oh, your girlfriend, yeah, right, okay, right, okay, so they would take that super okay, I gotcha,
Yeah,
okay.
it's a hardcore Sharia state.
Right,
And
gotcha.
even other similar countries in the area that have better overall reputations, and rightly so, like Dubai, they're pretty hardcore in some ways that we don't realize. Like Dubai still has debtors prison.
Oh,
When
really?
the when the Great Recession hit and a lot of people were running out of money, they couldn't declare bankruptcy. They were using the last amount of money they had on their credit cards to flee the country on a flight, and they're abandoning their cars at the airport with a note saying, sorry, you can have the car. I can't pay my debts, but I don't want to go to prison.
Oh my god, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Whoa. Oh
So
gosh.
these countries over there are
Something
pretty
different, something
backwards in a
else.
lot of ways. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So Qatar is, basically Iran's, good buddy. Um,
Mm,
so Iran has been backtracking some. Qatar is backtracking. I think thus far it looks like just rhetoric, lip service,
mm,
nothing really significant. The other thing I did see as a statement from the Russian Foreign Ministry was a statement where they basically said, we think Russia's going to sorry, we think Trump's going to make this deal roughly along the outlines of what I talked about, where Russia is going to have to settle for the territory it already has, and we're not going to accept it.
So the Russians
okay,
have already said
that's
they won't accept such a deal, even though
Right?
it actually
Yeah.
does seem like a pretty good deal for the Russians. It's like if they get that
This
and
is
a
this
frozen
is
conflict for 20 years, I mean,
yeah.
mm,
This is my take on it, which is if you let people get away with this type of territorial aggression, it just incentivizes it, if not for them, but then for others,
yeah,
yes,
right?
which is
And
what happened with Biden and Obama.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go
yes.
ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
No, I think I'm agreeing with you in anticipation of what you're going to say. But yeah, they let Russia get away with aggression. It wasn't just Obama, right?
Mhm,
First, it was Clinton letting Putin get away with aggression in Chechnya right
mhm,
off the bat. Reinvaded Chechnya, killed a few 100,000 people there. They couldn't let Chechnya be independent. Oh no, God
mhm.
forbid. Um, then they did it with Georgia under President Bush.
Yeah, minimal consequences for Russia. They did it multiple times in the lead up to Ukraine. Then,
Yeah,
Mm,
then they're
mm,
surprised. People are surprised that Russia did it after they've done it like half a dozen
yeah.
times before.
yeah, I actually did a count on the number of invasions that Russia has done since the fall of the Soviet Union, and it was averaging one every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
They've invaded Georgia twice. They've invaded Ukraine twice. Um, they did a cyber attack on Estonia. They imposed an economic blockade on Lithuania through the port of
Yeah.
Klaipeda.
Intervened in
What?
like Kazakhstan, stuff like that.
Yeah, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan,
Mm,
Yep, yep.
mm,
Syria. Obviously, they helped Assad mass murder something like 400,000 or 500,000 Syrians
mhm,
in the civil war there.
mhm.
You know, it's it's not like Russia is going to stop. And even if, in theory, we could figure out exactly what Putin wanted and let him have it, and he actually was satisfied, there's lots of other bad guys out there in the world that want more than what they should have too.
Yeah,
Mm,
like,
So,
North
well,
Korea, China, and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Right. Yeah.
mm, mm,
So, I really do think we need to uh, take a firm line here,
mhm.
uh, as firm as we possibly can, and really mean it. I thought Obama's pathetic red line in Syria was a joke.
Mm, mm,
Oh, we're not going to let you use chemical weapons. Oh, wait, we just did. What are you going to do? Haha. Oh, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
mm,
the situation in Syria was a mess. I'd say Syria pretty much had like no good guys. I mean, like no team you'd really want to support there. So it was a bit more complicated than you'll say Ukraine, like Georgia.
I agree.
Yeah.
Overall, I would agree with you about that. Certainly, things were a lot more sketchy on all sides there. Nevertheless, Trump was able to tell Assad, hey, no more sarin gas attacks,
And they
and
stopped.
mhm.
and we're destroying the air base that you launched that attack out of with
And
all of those
and your
Russian,
factory and all that sort of stuff, your
yeah,
storage
with all
areas,
those
all those strikes.
Russian-made planes flown by Russian pilots with markings for binary containers of chemical weapons with Russian markings on them. Yeah, it's you know
Mm, mm.
we sent a few dozen Tomahawk missiles and no more sarin gas attacks in Syria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all it takes, and it seems like Trump fills that role of wielding power that way very effectively, much more than
Yes.
Obama and his red lines in the sand.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. He's decisive. He backs up what he says. He doesn't always say what I want him to, and doesn't always do the right thing. But I
mhm.
think he does a hell of a lot more than these other clowns we've had. I mean,
Mm,
when
okay.
Biden was asked about, how do we get Iran not to attack Israel? What do you tell Iran? Just don't. That's all he said. I mean,
Mm,
come
Yeah.
on.
mhm,
It
mhm,
was backed up by nothing. And I don't understand why the U.S. Navy has been sitting there taking incoming missile attacks from the Houthis in the Red Sea and only shooting down the incoming missiles and not
mm,
taking out the launch sites that they're coming from. I mean, why do the
Yeah.
Houthis
I
even?
like decapitating their leadership with like
Yeah,
actual
why
like
do the
coordinated
Houthis
strikes.
exactly? Why do the Houthis even exist anymore?
Yeah.
mm,
There's-
mm,
I point out that in the late '80s, um, we got into a war with Iran, a naval war called the Tanker War, because Iran was attacking Kuwaiti shipping
Mhm.
out of oil tankers. And we basically sent in the US Navy and some SEAL teams and destroyed half the Iranian Navy overnight.
mm. Wow. Wow.
So why aren't we doing things like that? I think
Mm,
the only reason is that, our leaders have been completely spineless. And, say what you want about Trump. I don't think spineless is an adjective that a whole lot of people
mm,
would say applies to him.
So, would you? How do you think? I want to continue along the Ukraine thing. It seems like we're it's still maybe sort of murky waters, but there are probably some positive signs with Ukraine. I'm just curious though. How would what do you think should be done with Iran, given what we've just been talking about?
Yeah.
Well, certainly a return to Trump's maximum pressure sanctions on Iran.
Hmm.
I think every single Iranian proxy force in the region needs to be wiped out.
Hmm.
That's Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas is basically almost done, thankfully. But also the Iraqi, what do they call them? PMFs, Popular Military Forces in Iraq. We abandoned Iraq thanks to Biden also, and we let Iran take over Iraq. I mean,
Hmm.
why did anybody think that was a good idea? I have no idea. But a
Mm.
lot of people don't remember Biden was supposed to be the guy in charge. He was in charge of renegotiating our treaty with Iraq in 2011. It's called the Status of Forces Agreement, SOFA, that would allow us to maintain a token U.S. military presence in Iraq with a few thousand troops, which is what our military leadership said was needed to keep the country stabilized. And by 2011, everyone was saying Iraq was won. We'd done it. We didn't need to have a huge amount of troops there anymore. There was no more insurgency. We just needed to
Mm.
have a minimal occupation
Yeah,
force
like a bit of a
there.
peacekeeping force sort of thing. Like,
Yeah, exactly. A rapid response force in case anything flared up. And Biden basically screwed up and didn't manage to negotiate the renewal of the treaty with the Iraqi government. And I don't think he tried very hard, and Obama didn't really care if he succeeded or not.
Mm.
And we had to leave entirely. And next thing you know, the
yeah, two
Syrian
years
civil war.
later, yeah,
Yeah, we have to send people back because ISIS is taking over the whole bloody place.
Mm.
You create a power vacuum, and if the power vacuum is not filled by you know reasonably good regimes, it's going to be filled by really bad regimes.
yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Mm.
wouldn't that be a
Yeah.
problem though? If like you went over these like Iranian proxies, like the popular forces in Iraq, wouldn't that just leave another power vacuum for a potential ISIS or something to pop up again?
Well, yes, I agree. That's why I really think we have to deal with Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran itself, the head of the snake, because as long as they're around, they're going to keep sponsoring these proxies in one way or another.
Mm.
They're not doing it by themselves, by the way. They're doing it with Russia. Russia
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
huge number of Russian-speaking Muslims into join ISIS.
Mm.
Russia sent a lot of weapons. When Russia and Syria were attacking the Syrian rebels, they made sure not to attack any of the ISIS encampments themselves. Just the Free Syrian Army.
Mm.
So they
Mm.
were doing everything they could. From their point of view, they wanted it to look like the only alternative to Assad was ISIS.
yeah,
Anybody that looked like they could be the least bit moderate, that was their top priority target to wipe out.
Right.
yeah. And I mean, that actually sort of worked. Like,
Yeah,
there's
it
basically
did.
no one left but Assad by the end of it.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Uh, so, I think we have to deal with Iran. Um, Ideally, what I would like to see happen is, I think the Iranian oil facilities should be taken out, and the Iranian nuclear program should be taken out at the very least.
Mhm. Mhm.
So like
Whether
some
that's going to
targeted
happen,
strikes. Yeah,
yeah, whether that's going to actually happen, I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, Israel. I read a book about Israel taking out Assad's nuclear program. So Assad had a nuclear program going with
yeah,
the North Koreans. He had the North Koreans coming into Syria to build him a nuclear weapons factory. Israel found out about it, and Israel came to the U.S. and said, "Hey, we'd like you to help us take this out."
Mhm.
And at the time, President Bush said, "Sorry, we're busy in Iraq.
Mhm.
You do what you want." And Israel had to go take it out on their own. I think they were able to do that because relatively easily because it wasn't very far along. Iran's had a lot more time to fortify theirs and harden it against
yeah.
strikes. But on the other hand, Israel's been able to accomplish a lot of stuff in the past year or so that I didn't think they'd be able to do.
Mhm.
It's been very impressive. So if anyone could do it, it's probably them.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah. So how do you think? So I think what we could see against the communist bloc, I suppose, Trump would initiate actual
Yeah.
economic sanctions that probably would actually work
Yes.
against. I presume.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot. I'm kind of punching in the dark here, but I think that would be his first step, and then just see he would see how that works, and judging on what works and what doesn't, he'd kind of close those loose ends and leave the ends that don't need to be tightened. Um, so
Right.
and then I think and then I think just judging on how they react and how they respond, but that would he would gauge from there on whether it is necessary to engage maybe militarily or with I don't know, maybe like quasi military, like I don't know, cyber attack. I'm not really sure. I'm
Right.
not really
So,
much of a
well,
seasoned.
I can think of several things to say on this. So, one first one is that I think there's a lot more opportunities for sanctions on the Russian economy than we've implemented thus far.
Yeah.
Um, we've done some. I think that's been good, but it's been nowhere near enough. In my mind, maybe I'm just being this crazy, out of it amateur here, but I don't understand why we're letting any oil tankers in and out of any Russian ports,
Right.
right?
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Why are we letting them operate in international waters? I don't understand
Mm,
that. I don't get that. The
mm,
Russia basically bought up this entire shadow fleet from the Greeks of oil tankers that they're using to ship oil around. They have to self-insure it. Okay, that's nice. We made them, self-insure because we won't let any of the big shipping insurance companies cover them. But I mean, come on, people. You
mm,
know,
mm.
they
Yeah.
you know they can do that. Why are we letting them still continue selling oil to India? Why are we letting them smuggle oil through Iran? Um,
Mm.
why are we letting them get machine tools from the West? All right,
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, we're like funding they still, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
it's
Sorry.
it's not even so much a matter of funding necessarily, but they're buying machine tools from Germany and from Japan, which are the big, manufacturers of high precision machine tools. Their entire military industry is dependent on those imported machine tools, and
Mm,
they're getting tech support from those countries for those machine tools and the software that they run on. You
mm,
know,
mm.
Right. So
they
you
don't
think
have
these companies in Japan and Germany should be sanctioned as well if they do these deals with Russia?
Yeah.
yeah,
It sort of makes sense. It
yeah,
makes no sense that they're not
yeah.
already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it needs to be stopped. There's no, they were only able to survive in World War II because we gave them lend-lease aid that gave them machine tools and a hell of a lot of raw materials. And they got, all the aluminum from their tanks from us, the raw materials, the bauxite that
Yeah.
they made into those, T-34 tanks. That came from us. They
Hmm.
couldn't have done that without us. They're still getting raw materials from us. Why are we letting them have any raw materials from the West? You
Mm,
know, the, as far as I can tell, the only thing that's been going on is this uh, escalation management, where we're so afraid of Putin's nuclear threats that we think he's going to, launch missiles if he gets mad enough. And every time he tells us, don't do this or I'll nuke you, somebody does it, and he doesn't nuke anyone.
mm.
We don't know if his nukes even work anymore because they require maintenance.
Yeah.
Um, we have supposedly told Russia that our conventional air power could take out every single nuclear launch facility he has if he makes a move towards activating any of them within a matter of hours. And that's one thing that I think the US military can probably still do.
Mhm,
Wouldn't you be getting
Um,
sort of risky there if you almost provoke Russia into like a actual like nuclear exchange by attacking their launch facilities? Like, uh,
it's possible, certainly, but the thing is here that you don't stop aggressors by caving into them.
mhm,
You know, you stop them by standing up to their threats.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm,
you know, otherwise they just keep making threats because it keeps working for them, and that's what Putin's been doing ever since 1999 when he came in, and Russia's been doing it a lot longer than that before him.
mhm,
Um, and to give you an idea of the power imbalance here, um, I have a friend in one of the Western intelligence agencies who I asked about this, and what I asked was, do you think that we could have taken out the Russian invasion force in 2022 with
mhm.
all the air assets that we had? In my mind, I thought maybe it would take us a week or two. And
yeah,
the answer I got was no, we could have done it within days.
right.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the kind of imbalance in power capability that we have. We know that the Russian air defense systems are crap as far as our stuff goes because none of them have ever shot down any of our uh, you know top of the line fighters.
Hmm. Right, right.
Iran's got them. They haven't done anything to Israel. Syria's got them. They haven't done anything to us. Um, the last time
Syria did shoot down that one F-16 a couple years ago, so
F-16, not top of the line, not an
true.
F-35, not an F-22. F-16s are obsolete.
Wow, right, right, right.
They were the greatest fighters in their world for their time, and they're still useful in a lot of ways. I wish
Mhm.
Ukraine had all the ones that have been promised to them,
I
but
mean, it's still a plane, right? I mean, it's better than no planes
yeah,
to have an F-16 or an
Oh,
F-15 or
absolutely.
something, F-18.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm all for it, and I wish Ukraine had a whole fleet of them instead of just the few that they've got that they can't afford to lose.
Mm.
Um, but we're dealing with the situation, as I understand it, is when we realized just how weak Russia's conventional forces really were, we figured out that the only hope Russia has of beating an actual Western military now is to go nuclear.
Yes.
Right, right,
Yeah, I think that's
right,
obvious.
right. Mm,
Yeah.
mm. So do you think they'll is that something they the thing is it's like it will be then again they're not like these aren't sane people we're dealing with. Like Putin is not a normal none of the people in the Kremlin are what we would
Yeah.
consider to be normal people. So,
Yeah,
The way they certainly think in a very different way than we do, but I
yeah,
don't think they're literally clinically insane.
okay.
They think
yeah,
solely in terms of raw power
Mhm.
and uh, you know, there are a lot of concepts of the West where we think about things like, constitutionality and stuff that Russia rejects on principle.
Mm,
Okay, this
mm,
goes back to the Russian czars. The Russian czars would, have a delegation from a foreign ruler come to visit them, like an ambassadorial mission or something. And they would ask them, does your ruler rule his people under contract with his people? And if they said yes, they'd say, "Well, that's not a real ruler. We won't recognize your boss as a ruler. We don't want to
mm,
talk to him. We don't want to have anything to do with him. That's
mm,
not real political power." You know,
mm.
but
so that's how they think.
oh, sorry.
Amazing. That's interesting.
Can I
Yeah.
just add, like, in that like within the plan of potentially this one that Trump may go for a 20-year frozen, freeze the front lines. I mean, I don't know what benefits Russia would get there. I don't know if the sanctions would still be in place or it's just, it's frozen. And hopefully, within a couple of years, you maybe get a new leader and you're willing to, leave some of the territory, some to all of the territory to reduce the sanctions. Like, I don't know. So, do you
Yeah,
think that could
I
potentially be like part of the deal? It's like, we'll freeze the conflict, but you still have the sanctions on you. And hopefully in 5 years, you get a good leader. Oh, he just left.
Oh gosh. Okay, that's all right. We'll just wait for Tim to rejoin. Thank that was I was looking forward to your
Yeah. And then
I'll just finish your question and
Yeah, I'll
then
finish the question just so it makes sense to the viewers. And then maybe in 5 years, 8 years, or whatever, however it longs to for Putin to either like die or retire or be replaced, that they might get a new leader on that's at least like willing to negotiate, potentially leave some of the occupied territories in return for unfreezing assets and whatnot. Yeah, sorry. I mean, the question makes sense. It's like, do you think that potentially the 20-year frozen could be used so that within a time frame after Putin's reign has finally come to an end, the next successor in Russia would
yeah,
potentially be willing to negotiate within, 5 years or something like that?
that's a very good question. I'm very skeptical of that happening, just because to me that sounds like what we've done with North Korea, and it's not working in North Korea.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think it would be a bad deal for Ukraine to accept that kind of proposal.
Mhm.
They might be desperate enough that they felt like they had to, but honestly, my biggest hopes here on are that if that sort of proposal is made, that Russia just outright refuses it, and then we go with the other option.
Right, which is more direct, which is more military
Yeah,
support. And then it would be on the
yeah,
Russians because we'd go, well, we offered you a pretty generous deal and you rejected it.
yeah,
Mm,
exactly. I think that in a way, Trump has to prove to all of his anti-Ukraine supporters that he tried. He
Yeah,
did his best, and oh, gee, he failed. Russia just wouldn't go for it. So
mm, mm,
what more can he do? Um,
mm.
to me, that seems like the most likely outcome here. But
yeah,
what do I know? I could
yeah.
be wrong. I knew people that knew people that knew Trump, but I don't really, have that
But they could
close
pull.
in any
Sorry, go
area.
ahead.
So
Mm, mm. They could maybe even try pull another perestroika or another glasnost or
well,
something. But
that's the thing that I think we really need to recognize overall in the background. A lot more within our national security establishment in the West, which is that the Cold War, if it ever really ended, it restarted again.
Right.
One of those historians that I really like, I can't remember which one, started referring to the 1990s as Russia's Weimar period, and I had
mm,
already arrived at that same conclusion. Putin's advent to power is basically, you know, analogous to Hitler coming to power there, and we need to just take it seriously. I think what Russia was trying to do uh, at the end of the 80s, early 90s was what China has accomplished, which is to fool us into thinking they're not really a threat and we should just, be completely economically engaged with them, trading with them, investing with them.
mhm,
And we did some of that with Russia. This is one of the things that annoys me that people say, oh, we made Russia do this. We rebuilt Russia's oil and gas
Right.
infrastructure. We let
mm,
them into the G7, making it the G8. We
mm,
let them into the OSCE.
mhm,
Um,
Well,
you
it's
know,
like after they invaded Georgia, it should have been obvious that, things weren't going. Like the peaceful whatever Russia's no longer a threat to anyone. Like should have been thrown out the window at that point because they invaded one of their like former Soviet territories and set up like puppet
yeah,
governments.
exactly right, totally, yeah, and gosh, what else? I mean, so I've been involved with the international libertarian organization that's now known as Liberty International, off and on over the years, and we were in touch with Andrei Ilarionov, who at
oh
the
yeah.
time was Putin's top economic advisor, who ended up having to flee the country because he was against Putin's foreign policy ideas. But he says that Putin was already planning to go into Ukraine as early as 2004 or five. So you know the Orange Revolution in Ukraine happened back then. You got to remember Putin tried to kill the leader of the Orange Revolution, Yushchenko, poisoned him with dioxin. Fortunately, he didn't die. Um, you know, Putin, so Ukraine it's been sort of one of the great strategic prizes of Europe for a long time. Okay, in World War One, the main thing that Germany was trying to do when it drove east was capture Ukraine, so it could take over the Ukrainian breadbasket because that was what was funding the Russian Empire's industrial buildup, was grain exports. Um, Again, in World War II, that Ukraine was one of the biggest areas of contention between Hitler and Stalin. Again, Stalin did the same thing. That's how Stalin did his industrialization, is by stealing all the grain from the Ukrainians and letting them starve to death so he could sell the grain and pay for his industrialization.
Yeah, yeah, shocking.
So
Mm,
it's one of the most incredibly strategic places in the world as far as agriculture and raw materials.
mm,
Not to mention having Crimea, which allows Russia to control the Black Sea.
mm, mm, mm,
One of Russia's great imperial goals over the centuries has been a warm water port, and
mhm,
Crimea is a warm water port. They want to keep that.
mhm, mhm,
They don't have that many. So in World War II, all the lend lease aid that we sent into Russia had to either go over Norway to Murmansk and Archangel, or it had to go to Vladivostok over in the east.
Yeah, it's
Mm,
literally like all the way
or
over here.
mm.
yeah, right, exactly. Way the hell up there, which is also, by the way, where all of Russia's nuclear missile silos are.
Yeah. Oh, that
Mm.
makes sense because then it's closer because they'd go over the Arctic and go to the North America.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
nice. It's one of those weird things because we use this Mercator projection of the globe. We don't see the actual distances up
It's
there
actually
a lot
quite
closer.
close, like yeah, North
Yeah,
America and Russia.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird.
yeah,
It's weird to think it's
yeah.
kinda creepy, but yeah.
Right. And then the other routes were up through Crimea until it was occupied by the Nazis, and then through Iran through the Persian
Yeah,
Persian Gulf. So you
yeah,
only had 3 or 4 ways to get stuff in and out of Russia with the
Mm,
Soviet Union back then. They
mhm,
couldn't do the Baltic because the Nazis controlled the Baltic states.
mhm,
Um, so they really want that territory, and that's also where a good chunk of the Soviet Union's military industry was back in the Soviet period,
mhm.
um, because that's where they had a reasonably well-educated population base.
yeah. Well, I
Because
mean, the Moskva, the ship that was sunk, I believe, was actually made in like Kherson, I believe, like somewhere in Ukraine.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of their so Ukraine, the Soviet Union's equivalent to the Top Gun fighter training school was in Ukraine. Um, just they had a lot more well-educated human capital out of Ukraine than anywhere else because Ukraine was a relatively recent addition to the Russian Empire. So they
Yes.
were exposed to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment,
Mhm,
and Russia just really wasn't. Russia,
mhm.
I tell people Russia is basically what you get when you cross Vikings with Mongols.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true.
You
That's a good
know,
one. Mm,
the Russians were Vikings originally, and so were the early Ukrainians. But then Russia got conquered by the Mongol Empire, and the last part of the Mongol Empire that existed was in what is now Russia. So they basically set the pattern for the Russian style of rulership and
mhm,
the Russian concept of power. It all goes back to the great Khans.
mm,
Um, the
mm,
Nevskys, they're considered to be the great Alexander Nevsky is supposed to be this great Russian hero of the Battle of the Neva. The Nevsky family basically took over in Moscow as the puppets of the Mongols.
Yeah,
mm, mm,
yeah,
mm,
And they
mm,
constantly had to go to the Mongol court and abase themselves to prove their loyalty. Oh, yes, we'll do whatever you say.
mm, mm,
Um, but wasn't until centuries later that the Duchy of Muscovy was able to gain its independence from the Mongol Empire,
mm.
and they basically have been operating like that with that sort of mindset pretty much ever since.
It's amazing how it hasn't changed. That they're still of that mindset, and as you say, it's like fundamentally they just do not understand. I guess what could be simplified down to freedom, which is what we
Yeah,
have in the West, which
yeah,
is
and one of the great ironies of this is that you can actually read stuff written by Karl Marx in the 19th century, uh,
mm.
well before the Russian Revolution, where he's describing the Tsarist Empire in very much this sort of way.
right, right.
Yeah. Um. Um. Tim, you've been
Yes,
really good, man. Do you need a glass of water or something? Because you've been talking for a really long time, and I just want to make
uh,
sure.
I've got something here. I'm good.
Oh, okay, okay. I just want to be respectful of your time. Are you okay for one more question? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I've really been digging this. This is really good. I wish we could keep going, but I think yeah, just considerate of Hector. But I have this one question I want to ask. I'm dying to ask. So so all right, how do I ask this? So, in spite of Trump's foreign policy being measurably better than his predecessors for Ukraine, um, and of course we've been speculating on how the Trump administration may influence successful outcomes for Ukraine, but we see a lot of figures. So we think that Trump will be better. Even though things are a little murky right now, we think that Trump will be better However, there along with that is we see a lot of strange figures kind of coalescing around Trump who are not pro-Ukraine, such as Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, Alex Jones, Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, and even Ron Paul in his own kind of way. So a lot of these people are typically isolationist in their stance with America, or in many of these cases, they're actually sympathetic to Russia's aims in expansion throughout
Right.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean that I have we have this great friend of the show, James Falk. He's called at Eyes of the Republic on X. Everybody should check him out.
Yep. I
And
know who you're talking about.
yeah, you know him, and yeah, he does these great mind maps and kind of schematics of how a lot of these organizations and figureheads in the West are actually along the line connected to literal Russian intelligence, like SVR and even like GRU and FSB and stuff. So like, it's so he's done a lot of great work with that. Sort of
Yes.
visualizing it. So I mean, and what I think he just as an aside to this question, and I'll refurbish my question in a sec. But I mean, these are like no matter what level, if they're directly politically involved, like Matt Gaetz or MTG or Vance, or whether they're sort of more cultural, like Owens, Candace Owens, or Alex Jones or Musk. You know, it's like these are big people, and they have their connections and they have their network. So it's really interesting, and it's important for people to like. I'm just speaking to the audience right now. It's important to consider that like that these people have these opinions and are all touting them is no small matter is what I'm trying to impress upon our listeners right now. So I want to get your thoughts on. So we're seeing these strange people come around Trump. They have this isolationist stance, or that they're actually sympathetic to the Kremlin's aims in Ukraine. I want to know like what are your thoughts on this strange phenomena and what we're seeing? Oh, RFK, I forgot to mention he's in
Yeah.
that group as well. RFK is
Right.
actually a big one. um but yeah, so I want to get your thoughts on what you think about this, and the
Yep.
strange group of people that poses do they like pose a real threat to US and Western security? It's just weird, and I just want to hear you out on it and hear what you think.
Yep. Sure. That's a very good question. What about these guys? So certainly we've seen a lot of people jumping on the Trump bandwagon, and for obvious reasons. They want to try and have as much influence as they possibly can. And I think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is actually a good example of this, just because that's one where Trump has actually said something about what he will and will not uh, let Kennedy have influence on.
Oh.
He said basically that he's going to, try and let Kennedy have some influence on our uh, health policies, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, because my understanding is Kennedy is a lot more of a vaccine skeptic than I am.
Hmm.
Um, it's a bit complicated. I am pro-vaccine when it comes to traditional, well-established vaccines, but I'm not big on vaccine mandates.
Okay.
I think relatively recent experimental, not well proven vaccines are more of an iffy question.
Yeah. Yeah.
But without wasting too much time on that, but Trump has basically said he doesn't want to let Kennedy have any influence on fracking, and Kennedy has been very anti-fracking in the past. Kennedy
Mhm.
basically got the state of New York to ban fracking, which I
Wow.
think has been a very bad thing. They imposed this, moratorium that, like all things that are supposed to be, temporary government measures is as far as we can tell, permanent. Um, I don't think I've seen anything that Trump's actually said about any of these other people that is as concrete as that. Um, but I think a lot of them uh, are either misled about the facts. So for instance, I think a lot of American conservatives are mad at Ukraine because they think Ukraine was in cahoots with the Democrats to impeach Trump for supposedly blackmailing Ukraine into, uh, you know, investigating Biden, and Trump supposedly, withheld aid from Ukraine. That never happened. That's
Mhm,
not what it was. But I think a lot of conservatives blame Ukraine for that. I think they also are mad at Ukraine because of Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma, which was a Ukrainian energy firm. I think what they don't realize is that Burisma was run by a Russian FSB agent
ah,
who has
mhm.
had to flee Ukraine and go back to Russia.
There you go. There you go. Yep. Always the case, huh? Mm,
Yeah, exactly. So, they don't know this, they don't realize this. I told some of these people this and they just go, "What? What are you talking about?" They have no idea. Yeah,
wow.
it comes completely out of the blue to them. They're totally unaware of it. So,
Mm,
it's important to point out these things. A lot of them think that we've been just handing, piles of cash to Ukraine. We haven't. We've
mhm,
been giving them weapons that we were going to have to destroy because they're obsolete. Um, they're getting replaced with brand new weapons that we're making here. So the money is being spent making those new weapons for our own forces.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
and Ukraine hasn't gotten a lot of those weapons either. Zelensky just recently said they've only gotten like 10% of the stuff that they've already been promised. It's
Yeah.
not even a matter of, us having to promise to give them more. We just need to give them what we've already said we're going to give them.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm, mhm,
so there's a lot of that going on. Some of these guys, I think, are ideologically sympathetic to Putin
mhm.
for religious reasons. They think that Russia is somehow this champion of Christianity and
Wow.
social traditionalism, which is just so wildly untrue.
Yeah.
To me, this is just shows that they are completely ignorant. I mean, for
Yeah.
instance, I love telling these people that uh, in Russia, it is legal to have child pornography.
Yeah. That's where yeah, that's I've seen some things around that where there's
Yeah.
like even child prostitution. Like yeah.
There's no, yeah, the age of consent laws in Russia are fuzzy.
Yeah. That's really
So,
weird. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, this is especially bizarre for the QAnon fools who think, oh, Putin's going to save us from the satanic pedophiles.
Mm,
Um,
mm, yeah.
Putin was accused of pedophilia himself by Litvinenko,
That's
the
right.
FSB defector that he had killed in Russia with polonium poisoning.
Mm.
And because polonium is such an expensive element to make, it's estimated that this was the single most expensive assassination ever in history.
Mm,
You know,
mm.
the poloniums probably cost Putin something like a couple of $100,000 just to
Right.
just to be able to kill this guy.
Mm,
You don't do this just because
mm.
you
You don't
Yeah.
like him or something, yeah.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't like that. Yeah, exactly. You do it because you really want to make a point.
Mm,
Russia has a huge human trafficking network all around the world. They recruit, and voluntarily or not, they recruit enormous numbers of prostitutes and send them all over the world to work and send money back to Russia. They work for the Russian mafia. And the
mm,
Russian mafia is very well known. They operate all over the world. I have a friend in the family who is a salesman for a medical device export firm based in California. And he was their Russian sales rep. He would go to Russia, every year for 30 years for months at a time. He was a native speaker, but he was born and raised here in the US. Got his PhD in Russian history. He's a direct descendant of a famous Russian intellectual named Alexander Herzen.
mhm.
And the Russian mafia paid a visit to his office in California to hold them up at gunpoint to extort money out of them.
Wow.
They do stuff like that. And this is back in the 90s. They did stuff like that. Um,
Wow.
these guys are a big deal. In my industry, I work in the email marketing field. and there are people whose jobs it is to identify senders of spam emails and figure out ways to block them. There was a story several years ago about one of the guys who worked for an anti-spam organization whose daughter was kidnapped by the Russian mob, and
Oh
she
my
was
god.
pimped out, and it took him a couple of years to get her back.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's
So
horrifying. It's terrible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
This is how these guys operate. They are serious. They are hardcore. They are ruthless. They don't care. The Russian government's policy for these spammers and hackers is if they attack targets outside of Russia, they don't care. And if anything, they like it because it gives them cyber warfare capabilities that they can exploit against us if they feel like they need to.
mm, mm. Yeah.
Um, you know, the notion that Russia is a Christian country, I
Yeah.
mean, Russian soldiers who are, recruited slash conscripted uh,
Mm,
often get rented out by their officers as
mm.
male prostitutes.
Didovshina, I think.
Yeah,
It's yeah,
exactly.
it's wild. Yeah, and there've been a lot of
Yeah,
like suicides and stuff, and
yeah,
they just pimp out their own
Yeah, like sexual
these
abuse within the military, like it's actually
yeah,
nuts.
exactly.
crazy
Yeah,
man. They're
when
looked down so poorly. These soldiers,
yeah,
like they're not
oh
even
yeah.
like humans. Yeah.
Yeah, they're considered to be disposable scum as part
Mm,
of a deliberate strategy to make it so they have no social status to be able to launch a military coup and take over. Um, which is why I think all the people who are hoping for Putin to be, overthrown by either the military or by the oligarchs, it's a fantasy, it's a delusion. It's not going
right.
to happen. It's never happened there.
Mm,
It's just not something that happens in Russia. Their culture doesn't allow for it.
mm,
Um, Oh, there was something else I was going to mention. What was it? Yeah, this whole notion that somehow Russia is this bastion of traditional white Christian heterosexuality
mm,
uh,
mm.
is nonsense. Oh yeah, but the Wagnerites were recruiting convicts out of the prisons to send them into Ukraine. They had to have special identifiers for the ones who had AIDS
Oh,
so that the medics that had to work on them would be able to wear additional personal protective equipment to keep themselves from being exposed to those bodily fluids that had HIV in
oh
them.
my gosh,
You know,
crazy. Yeah. I also to monopolize on. Actually, I'll let you go. I'll let you go.
no, go ahead, follow up, please.
I was just gonna say on the Litvinenko thing. There was the I believe it was when Putin. I think did he become he reached some position. I think in the KGB. And then Litvinenko said, when that happened, he said, "Oh no, the homosexuals and the pedophiles are coming to power, or are taking over." And
The way I remember it is what he said was that they would never allow Putin to rise any higher in the FSB because they knew about his pedophilia.
oh, okay, that was that. Okay,
But,
and they
you know,
some.
he was only a colonel. He was
Mm,
not a KGB general.
okay, right, right, yeah, okay. Thanks for I was a bit
Yeah.
blurring that, but yeah, and yeah, they had some. I believe it's speculated that they have some sort of stuff on him, and then also there's that really weird video clip of him walking down Moscow Square, like I guess Red Square, and that there's that little boy, and
Yeah.
he bends down, pulls him towards this random boy, lifts his shirt up and kisses him on the
Kisses him
belly,
on the stomach. Yeah.
just randomly.
It's
Yeah.
it's certainly weird. I have a friend who's a Russian translator who says that's actually a fairly common thing in Russia, but
Okay.
it certainly is not the sort of behavior we would normally expect to happen with children here.
Mm,
And if you think about all the fuss that was made about Biden's bizarre behavior with women and children, uh,
mm,
a lot of conservatives were, you know, making all sorts of insinuations about Biden because of that. They don't say anything about Putin, and Putin, you know, has done plenty of things equally weird.
mm, yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, talking about the interview afterwards, they were like, "Oh, why did you do that?" And he was like, he started acting kind of strange. He was like, oh, like the boy looked like independent but vulnerable and strong at the same time or something. Like it was kind of strange. Like there was
Yeah.
an interview afterward, and yeah, so like kind of weird, kind of strange, very
Mhm.
weird. But I didn't realize that. But yeah, it's funny they go on and on about the Christian thing when a lot of the Orthodox communities are like spied on by the Russian government,
Oh
and
yeah.
also like people don't actually realize this. The the church attendance in Russia is like abysmally low. It's like
Yes.
it's something like 4%, whereas in the U.S. they probably I think they have like 4 times that. It's more like 40% in the United States or 39%
Yeah, I
into.
don't know the number. I know that it's a lot higher. The other thing is that not only is the Russian Orthodox Church a branch of the FSB in practice,
Mm,
um, Russia also has one of the highest abortion rates in the world
yeah,
because they
yeah.
basically use abortion as birth control. And that's also why one of the reasons why Russia has such a low birth rate, because after women have had abortions, it's much harder for them to have children.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah. Shocking. That's
Yeah.
terrible. That's really really terrible stuff.
I've heard stories about Russian sexual mores. I forget who I was reading about, but somebody was stationed there, I think, at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow or St. Petersburg in the 90s. And, they were single and they thought the Russian girls were attractive, and a lot of them are very pretty. So he asked one out, asked if she wanted to, go out to dinner with him or have a movie, and she laughed, took him back to her apartment, and had sex with him right then and there.
Jeez.
So, they're not, good Christian girls in that sense. They're not
Mm,
chaste, they're not abstinent. You
mm.
know?
Yeah, yeah. Still kind of like living the sort of like through the aftershock or living through the period of free love that was implemented
Yeah,
by the
yeah.
communists almost like
Yeah,
it's
and
yeah.
and now one of the things that we have to allow for is that the '90s really were economically horrible in Russia.
Hmm.
Yes.
They basically had a huge outmigration of Russian girls to work as prostitutes elsewhere because things were that economically desperate there, and not just Russia either. I've even read stories about girls who were originally duped into working as prostitutes in the West out of whatever rural village they grew up in Eastern Europe, but then they'd get rescued, they'd go back home, and then they'd voluntarily go back into the trade in the West
Mm,
because
mm,
things were so bad at home.
mm,
So, but again, if you're a champion of Christian conservatism and chastity and abstinence and all this, you'd think that developing your economy so that this sort of thing is not an economically attractive option would be on your agenda. But Putin basically hasn't done any of that.
yeah. No reforms, no changes. Yeah. So okay,
Yeah.
interesting, interesting. So it seems like a lot of these people probably are just quite ignorant, and
Yeah.
maybe if they are involved with some funny people, they don't perhaps quite understand what it is they're getting involved with or who they're dealing with and
Yeah.
what the deal is with that. Like, yeah, I kind of, other than Alex Jones, I think Mr. James Folk has shown something strange there, and perhaps even Musk. But
There definitely is. Now, I don't know that much about Musk. I have very briefly years ago met Peter Thiel. He came to speak at my wife's supper club in San Francisco at the time, but
oh,
he didn't say anything untoward. And we didn't really, I doubt he'd remember me. He might remember my wife, but
mhm,
who knows?
mhm,
I don't know Musk. It's quite possible to me, though, from what little I do know about him, that he could just be sort of under the influence of some of these people who, have a more favorable view of Russia without really knowing that much about it. I'm guessing, hoping slash expecting that he will be one of the people that will be rapidly disabused by Putin in the near future. But who knows? Some of these people, Tucker Carlson's father is apparently a paid lobbyist for the Hungarian government for Viktor Orban.
yeah, Yeah, that's right. Mhm. A lot of weird
I
connections. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and we don't know how much investment some of these high tech guys are getting from Russia, but
Mhm.
that's not something that's very well controlled as far as transparency goes here in the U.S. It's
Mhm.
relatively easy for foreign investors to invest in U.S. high tech startups without anyone really knowing about it.
Mhm.
And in the tenant media case, we saw that apparently all these tenant media people didn't even realize they were on Russia's payroll.
I find that hard to believe. Like, how do you, how do you not know that? You know, like, wouldn't your ears perk up a little bit if you were getting all that money to
You
kind
would
of,
think.
yeah, yeah.
You would think. I mean, I've never had enough money to be able to buy my own skate park if I felt like it. So
Yeah.
apparently one of them did. It's not what I would spend my money on. I'd be more likely to buy a shooting range. But at any rate,
Yeah, that'd be
Well,
cool.
you know, but you know, they had that kind of money just for being YouTube
yeah,
podcasters.
yeah, it doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, just to add there, because I mean, obviously, a lot of people say, I mean, they support Russia or whatever without really thinking it, because they see Russia as like you should say, alternative, an alternative to the
Yeah.
West. And because, you know, the West and like the Democrats have been in party for like 4 years, and they were pushing
Hmm.
stuff like open borders, mass migration, you know,
Hmm.
gender ideology for children, that sort of thing, stuff that's very
Yep.
unpopular. Now that you've
Yep.
got Trump in and he starts to
Hmm.
implement some much more positive policies, and people start going, oh, wait, actually, our government's not that bad anymore. And he tried to, you know, tried to make a
Mm,
deal with Russia. He declined it. Oh, maybe they were actually the bad guys all along. Once you start getting like
Yeah,
an
I
actual,
think that's quite likely. I think that will definitely happen with some people. I don't know how many, but that's a
mhm,
very good point. We
mhm.
could see some of that. Um, you know, and you know, Zelensky has met with Trump and said good things after the meetings. So, you know, I don't think they're going to be able to try and make Zelensky out to be as much of a bad guy as they have before.
Mhm.
You
yes.
know, one of the things is when you're, you know, leading a country against a genocidal invader and you need help, you've got to get along with the people that you need help from,
Mm,
Yes.
no
mm,
matter who they are.
mm.
And
Well,
we've cozied up, we've allied with all kinds of people in the past when we had to. We allied with Stalin, we've allied with Mao. You know,
well, I mean,
these are
like I
not
was saying before, you're allied with Qatar and all these bizarre countries
Yeah.
that you shouldn't really be
exactly.
allying with.
Yeah, right. So, you know, we did that because we thought we had to, rightly or wrongly. So, you know, blaming Zelensky for getting along with Biden to me, I think is just
Yeah.
Yeah,
too
kind of
much,
silly.
too
Yeah.
extreme.
It's just
Yeah,
contrarianism, right? I think just some people don't like. Oh, they think Russia's good because they don't like their current government in the West, or they don't like the way the
yep,
West is heading, which is completely fair. But it's like obviously, like Russia isn't actually your friend because you don't like the government. It's just
right.
it's a non-logical. It's a position that doesn't make any
Yes,
sense. And with Trump in
yeah. Plus,
power, that
yeah,
should start hopefully shifting, and you won't just have like contrarians on the right supporting Russia because they don't like Biden. So I don't
yeah,
know.
exactly. And plus, you know, a big part of their pitch has been freedom of speech, which is, of course, you know, very, very important.
Mhm.
Mm,
Thanks to, I'm very grateful that Musk bought Twitter and freed it from censorship. You know, even some of these Ukraine haters like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have been saying, you know, they're in it, they're supporting Trump because he's anti-censorship.
Mm.
But you know, you got to realize, in Russia, censorship is normal. It is the way
Oh, of
things are done.
course. Yeah.
yeah.
You
No,
know,
it's terrible over there.
if you
Yeah.
hold up a blank piece of paper in Red Square, you can be arrested.
What the heck?
Yes, yeah, it's happened. You know, if you're an opposition politician in Russia, like Boris Berezovsky, no, sorry, Boris Nemtsov, I think it was, you can be killed by Putin or his cronies. If you are a journalist critical of Putin in Russia, like Anna Politkovskaya, you can be killed. She was murdered on Putin's birthday, and she was very critical of Putin and how he was running the war in Chechnya.
Mm, mm.
So if you care about censorship, if you're against censorship, you should be against Russia.
Yeah,
Well, I
really,
mean, you
really.
can't criticize the government, you can't criticize the military operation, you can't really,
Yeah,
can't criticize anything there. And they go, oh yeah,
yeah,
we don't like our government in the West because they're pro censorship, while Russia has the same censorship on, overload.
On steroids,
Yeah,
yeah.
yes,
Like,
exactly, precisely. Yeah, you're not even allowed to call it a war.
mm,
yeah,
mm,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. But anyways, I think we should start wrapping it up. We've been going for 3 hours now, so I think
Mm.
it's a
Yeah.
good time to start wrapping it up. Are there any final statements you want to share, Tim?
Oh gosh, well, just I'm so grateful that you guys invited me on to do this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Mm.
Um, I'm very hopeful once again that things are going to start getting better here and around the world with a new administration. Obviously, there's a lot that is still yet to be determined about that. Uh,
Yes.
but I think things were going to be very, very, very bad if Harris won in all sorts of ways, even worse than Biden.
Mm.
Um, I think I've even heard some Ukrainians say that they're sick and tired of Biden and they want a
Yeah.
chance to
Yeah, well, that's
try
the
Fair.
thing.
somebody
I mean,
new.
Trump. I mean, when you look at his record with like North Korea and stuff, I mean, Trump threatened to like bomb North Korea if they ever attacked any U.S. Soldiers in,
Yeah,
either South Korea or Guam or whatever. And the
yep,
North Koreans settled down and they stopped threatening everyone. So,
Mm,
yeah.
mm,
I mean,
mm,
maybe they were just biding their time until somebody else came into power, but Trump's back, so that at least hopefully that'll buy us at least another 4 years.
mm.
Um, I was fairly skeptical about Vance at first, but I've warmed up to him. I think he's pretty smart and well informed. I don't think he's naive.
Okay.
I think he's open to learning. He's open to new information.
Mhm,
He thinks about it intelligently. I don't agree with him about everything, but I think he takes things seriously. I don't
mhm.
think he's flippant or glib. And I have some hope for him.
I mean, we'll see.
So
We'll see. I mean,
yeah,
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I was pretty impressed with his interview with Rogan.
Mhm,
Um, you know, he handled himself quite well in that. There's some things he didn't know that I was surprised he didn't know, but
right.
he knows a lot, and I think his instincts are basically pretty good.
mm.
Um, so I have a lot of hope, and I don't think it's going to be the worst case scenario for Ukraine at all.
Okay.
Um, I think, and that's the one I was the most worried about.
Mm,
Other foreign policy stuff, I think Trump will be a lot better overall.
mm.
Not just for the hotspots that we've talked about, but for a lot of the world. I just heard him talking about Trump was talking about some sort of trade deal with the UK
Right.
to
Yeah.
try and make the most of Brexit. That would be good because the UK hasn't really, implemented any real changes there, as far as I can tell.
Mm.
Well, the UK is in a sorry state
Yeah.
as well, unfortunately. So,
It
Mm.
that
is, yes, right,
yeah.
yeah.
Too bad.
Um,
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyways, I'll start wrapping it up now. So,
Mm.
thank you, Tim, for coming on, and thanks to those that watched us live or are watching the replay. I hope you had a great weekend, and I hope you have a great evening. We'll see you again next time. And as always, stay blessed, not stressed. Have a great evening.